Chapter 1163. Was that a reflection in the mirror or an illusion from the deepest recesses of his memories? It was difficult to distinguish between reality and illusion. The moment the silver mirror appeared, everything seemed to float away like bubbles. Only the woman in the mirror raised her hand and extended it towards Woodman, who was still on the gallows. It crossed the boundary between reality and illusion and broke through the endless passage of time. It landed on his forehead. Such a gentle touch, but it brought about a terrifying impact that felt like a falling star. An invisible storm erupted from that slender, white index finger. Huaisher only felt his vision darken. The countless consciousnesses in his soul involuntarily jumped for a moment, as if they were about to split into thousands of Huaishers. He subconsciously took a step back. However, that illusion had already dissipated in an instant. Immediately afterwards, however, a shrill cry rang out. It was so loud and shrill. The dying original sin beast was howling and roaring. An invisible storm had been stirred up. To Huaisher, it was just an impact that caused him to take a step back. However, in Woodman's eyes, it had already become a terrifying flood that swallowed up the entire world. In front of that finger, a small ripple spread out, casually triggering an endless chain reaction. It absorbed the remnants of disaster and scattered origin substances in the air. The invisible storm began to take shape. Within the reality domain, the ascendants who had been contaminated and corroded by the solidification couldn't help but let out sorrowful cries. They felt the pain of an ice-cold scalpel stabbing into their skulls. Immediately afterwards, they couldn't help but be immersed in an invisible wave of warmth. Wisps of sin of darkness rose up from their corrupted souls and flew into the distance, ushering in purification and annihilation. However, to Woodman, this wave of warmth was like lava that completely swallowed him up. It was as if a nuclear bomb had exploded right in front of him. The febrile wind spread out, and everything in its path was peeled off. The seven-headed dragon's corpse spasmed violently. Countless scales rapidly turned to dust and were blown backwards. Immediately afterwards, its flesh, organs, and even its pale white bones were all reduced to dust. Within the pure white storm domain, no other color existed. No other sound could be heard. The entire world was silent. Nothing else could be seen. Everything had disappeared into the distant darkness. There was only pain, endless pain. Burning, freezing, tearing, crushing, swelling, piercing, slashing, devouring, dismembering. The endless pain swallowed Woodman like an ocean. But the pain only lasted for a moment. Then he disappeared. It was like an angry slap in the face. It was just an accidental loss of self-control, but it didn't last long. When the waves of pain in the deepest part of his soul receded, only Woodman was left crawling forward on the pale beach. He spasmed and struggled, but he no longer had the strength to move. It was no longer a poisonous stream of nothingness, nor was it the ferocious form of a solidified being. Under the authority of the white god, the last remnants of its consciousness actually turned around for a brief moment, and it regained its former appearance. He was already on the verge of death. As for that pair of dark green eyes, they were still quietly looking down. There was neither sorrow nor joy. "Pelagiah, is that you?" He stared at the pair of eyes, and the expression in his eyes changed. It was as if he was looking at a dream from the past, and it was hard to tell whether it was fear or surprise. It was unbelievable. At the same time, he couldn't touch it. No matter how he reached out to touch it, he couldn't feel the temperature of the illusion again. This was the distance of indifference. "Long time no see, Woodman." Pelagiah raised her hand, pulled back the messy hair on her forehead, and asked in confusion, "It seems that the great future in hell isn't as beautiful as you think, right?" "Huh, stupid words." Woodman panted with difficulty and shook his head. "Is there any beautiful place in this world?" "Of course there is," Pelagiah replied, "but it has been destroyed by you. Do you still remember? When everything collapsed, you witnessed it yourself. All the people who were killed, their faces and eyes are still in your memory. You have done all of this with your own hands, Woodman." Woodman was stunned on the spot. He was silent for a long time, and he couldn't help but sneer. It was so mocking. "Yes, it's me," he asked. "Are you here to judge me?" "Of course." Pelagiah nodded. "I have never forgotten your betrayal, Woodman, even after so many years. This is the evil karma you deserve. This cold look really doesn't suit you, Pelagiah." Woodman grinned and felt the ridicule and absurdity of fate. "I thought it would be that guy Vitali. Ha ha ha. In the end, even the eternally compassionate and gentle white god has to do this kind of dirty work. I really want to see your cruel look, Pelagiah," he asked teasingly. "Or even you don't have redemption to give me." In the long silence, no one responded. There was only a calm look. Pelagiah stared at the pair of unfamiliar eyes. There was no hatred or disgust. She reached out and stroked the face of the betrayer. It was so gentle. "Shouldn't you have understood long before this?" White God bent down and whispered in the sinner's ear, "You have embarked on the path of rebellion. What awaits you ahead is only the endless abyss and hell. Even if the realm is right behind you, you can never turn back. I won't be furious, but I don't have any more mercy to give you. Woodman, you have to remember that I am Pelagiah Bellowberg of the Kingdom of Heaven. I have only left you with a curse. In the destruction that you deserve, such a calm narration, without any hatred, but with an obsession that was far more resolute than those things. She cruelly and straightforwardly made a conclusion. Even if one day everything ushers in destruction and end, all things burn in flames, all lives wither in darkness, all sins usher in reckoning and judgment. What awaits you is only eternal pain and nothingness in the hell that you have created with your own hands," she said. "Only you can't get any redemption or relief." The moment the judgment came, the last peaceful place in the depths of the soul collapsed. The barrier of the bubble broke, revealing the endless storm of Origin's substance in the distance. The poison of annihilation, the original sins he had accumulated, and even more, the hatred and pain from more dead people. In the long and endless time, for 70 years, the endless despair and thoughts that had sunk into the abyss. At this moment, all of them were pulled out from the records of the Book of Destiny. The killing intent and emotions of nothingness were given substance, forming a storm that could shake all consciousness, a dark ocean that could destroy all souls. Now, under White God's will, the chaotic color that could melt hell raised a monstrous wave and swept toward the last embankment. It nibbled at his soul and stripped away his consciousness bit by bit. It was as if thousands of pairs of painful hands were slowly and cruelly tearing him apart, pulling him into the despair that he had created with his own hands, even if it would only exist in this short moment. But for those who fell into it, it would be endless suffering and torture that would last for eternity. This is the ending worthy of you, Woodman. Pelagiah said her goodbyes calmly. Just like that, she watched as the tide slowly rose and engulfed Woodman on the beach bit by bit, dragging him into the eternal void where only torment existed. She ignored the cries and pleas from the sea, shouting and urging her to stay. She coldly turned around and left. She never looked back. Everything came to an end in an instant. Eternal judgment, eternal torture, and eternal ravaging. At the end of the endless suffering, the broken soul was completely annihilated. Even in the deepest part of the land of dreams, inside the sealed stone coffin, the shriveled corpse was spasming in pain. Dark blood flowed out of the body, quickly evaporating and disappearing. In the spreading destruction, the corpse trembled, and its eyes suddenly opened. A silent roar, an invisible storm, followed the connection between the origin substance and came in reverse. Then it exploded with a sorrowful cry. It swept toward the world of the traders in front of it, swallowing everything it saw along the way. The alarm sounded. In the core, the slumbering Westcott woke up from his endless dream. But when he wanted to cut off the stairway to heaven that led to the gamble, it was already too late. Countless evil thoughts and good thoughts entangled together, forming an explosion that could tear all souls apart, causing all the solidifiers to fear. A shocking pale white color gushed out from the coffin, rumbling and spreading, sweeping across the entire underground sealed area in an instant. Only the wails of countless solidifiers could be heard as their souls exploded. The anger from the white god descended here, guiding the anger and despair that had been sleeping for 70 years to set off an invisible wave, covering everything within its reach. The sound of cracking could be heard incessantly. After a long, long time, when the terrifying storm completely subsided, Westcott's projection descended, and no remnants of the poison stream could be found. In the broken stone coffin, the corpse shattered silently, turning into dust. The soul within had already disappeared. Only a crack remained here, extending downwards into the depths of the land of dreams. It pierced straight through the layers of seals and restrictions, piercing through the seal. All the soul fragments that had been sealed and frozen in the shackles had already disappeared without a trace. They went away with the storm, disappeared without a trace. In the darkness, in those nightmares filled with despair and pain, Vitaly suddenly opened his eyes. In the quiet town, in the illusion, he looked around in a daze and heard the sound of something shattering. Cracks appeared all around the town. In the sky, countless white cracks intersected. The turbulence suddenly enveloped the entire mirror of day and night. But when Vitaly tried to stabilize it, he discovered that everything was out of his control. Those illusions, those shattered souls preserved in bubbles, and the world in front of him no longer responded to his calls. He ran through the streets in a sorry state, shouting at the silent houses on both sides. But no one responded. The sky, the earth, the lights, everything was quickly moving away from him. But when everything disappeared without a trace, in a world of nothingness, he once again saw the illusion that had appeared in his dreams countless times. Smiling, at the end of the crack, she waved at him. Her green eyes were filled with gentleness. Vitaly was stunned on the spot, stiff like a fool. Pella, Geya? He took a step forward, not daring to touch the illusion. Pella, is that you? What responded to him was a light hug, with a gentle temperature. It was so familiar. She used so much force, as if she was afraid that she would leave him again. She called his name, and warm tears fell on his neck. I'm back, Weija. White God, who had returned, smiled and shed tears. Are you okay? Vitaly hesitated, timidly and uneasily reaching out his hand to respond to her hug. But when he felt this familiar scene again, he couldn't feel his emotions surging. Ecstasy. He couldn't suppress his shout, responded to her hug, and immersed himself in this short illusion. Follow me. Pella, I have something to show you. Holding her hand, Vitaly turned around and looked for the town in the distance. He wanted to show her everything he had done all these years and introduce her to those children back then. But when he turned around, he found that the town he was familiar with had already appeared behind Pella. Those familiar children, and even more, those who had been lost in hell, and those who had returned, were all looking at him with gentle smiles. They waved goodbye. At that moment, Vitaly was stunned. He seemed to have understood something. Wait! He raised his hand and wanted to stop her, but he saw Pella's smile in front of him. She suddenly reached out and pushed him away. She was so determined that she didn't allow him to refute or question her. Goodbye, Weija. She said goodbye softly. It's been hard on you for so many years. Behind Vitaly, a door that led to the light opened again. It swallowed that sorry figure. It disappeared. Ivory Tower, great library. The busy work continued. The scholars rushed around and checked the data sent from all sides, but the noise didn't disturb the old man sleeping soundly on the counter. The dark and thin old man was drooling and snoring. He put his bare feet on the counter and scratched himself from time to time when he turned over. However, the people around him didn't dare to disturb him when they passed by. Instead, they carefully lowered their voices. Only a panicked shout was not concealed at all. Anya rushed in and agilely passed by the people blocking her way. She landed on the table and almost lost her balance. However, she didn't care about her messy hair and grabbed the old man's arm and shook it crazily. Not good. Not good. Something happened. When Krishna wiped his saliva and opened his eyes, she had already carried him and ran again. His thin body swayed in the wind, and his head hit the door frame in the air. "Pa!" Then, without waiting for him to speak, she hit him again. "Be gentle. Be gentle." Krishna pressed his hand on his hair and complained helplessly. "What's the matter? Why are you in such a hurry? What did your teacher do this time? Oh my God, he won't even let a retired old man go. Although he's my teacher, this is different from that. It's that. Anyway, you'll know when you see it." Ania replied incoherently, kicking down who knows how many doors along the way. She rushed into the silent hall. There, many people had already rushed over. Whether it was Yangzi, Raymond, Anton, or the other teachers, they all stood in the distance and looked at everything in the hall in a daze. In the center of the hall, there was a majestic and gorgeous giant mirror that was dozens of meters tall. It was emitting a faint light and didn't have the silence of the past. However, what was more eye-catching was the thin figure in front of the mirror. His hair was white, and his black clothes were as black as ink. The long robe was decorated with golden threads. Majestic and cold. So familiar. "Vi, Thali, you can come out." In the sudden shock, Krishna's eyeballs almost fell out of their sockets. However, when he came back to his senses, he couldn't help but dance in ecstasy. He shouted, laughed, and danced. Krishna rushed forward, hugged him, and patted his back with all his might. "Welcome back, old friend." The middle-aged man with white hair nodded. "I'm back." When he looked at the giant mirror in front of him, his once cold face was already covered in tears. "Did you see it, Pelagia?" He called out to the distant figures. "I'm back." Chapter 1164. In the decision-making room, when the angel of death was completely annihilated by Huai Shi, many people shouted excitedly. The disaster was completely eradicated, and the excellent performance of Heavenly Kingdom's lineage made many people's eyes pop out of their sockets. At the back, the lineage masters who were drinking tea together couldn't help but clap and congratulate. "Congratulations, congratulations." Xian Yao was the first to look at Russell. "It's just unfinished business from back then." Russell shook his head. "There's nothing to celebrate." Xian Yao smiled. "Isn't it a good thing to have a successor?" If Huaisher used a fragment of the day and night mirror to kill flowing venom, there was more or less an element of luck involved. Now, as a level 4, he killed the complete state of the beast of original sins cleanly, crushing its bones and scattering its ashes several times. This was a shocking achievement without any exaggeration. Indeed, we should have a toast. Feathered Serpent smacked his bland tea, slightly regretful. If not for the fact that the occasion was serious, he would have brought a bottle of whiskey or 2 cups. In the end, other than the dog urine coffee provided by the Astronomy Association for free, the only thing he could drink was the old stingy Xian Yao's pot of coffee that had been soaked for more than 10 times. Was the tea beside you really just to make up the numbers? Can't you put more in? He had already stared at Xian Yao 2 or 3 times, but Xian Yao just pretended not to understand. He couldn't do anything about it. Forget it. Let this old thing do as he pleases. However, speaking of which, there's another question. Xian Yao asked curiously. Woodman's complete state is so tough. How did you kill him back then? As soon as he said that, countless curious gazes looked over, filled with doubts and a desire for gossip. That's right. How'd you do it back then? After all, Mimir was not like Heimdall, who was not good at fighting head-on. Even if everyone knew that Russell was very fierce back then, before the fall of the heavenly state, he was still a level 4. He was not as fierce as Huai Shi, relying on the secret apparatus to kill Samuel, right? Russell was slightly stunned, as if he didn't understand. Actually, it's not that difficult. When talking about the past, Old Tortoise revealed a nostalgic expression, and the gentle smile at the corner of his mouth became creepy. Everyone just needs to chat, drink some wine, and take a stroll. Before he can react, we just need to push him into the particle collider, and that's it. Although the early preparations are a little troublesome, after closing the door, all I need to do is press 2 buttons, and the problem will be solved. It's quite simple. Speaking of this, he paused for a moment and sighed softly. Oh, speaking of which, until the last moment, he still thought that he was the only one with a knife in his arms, ready to make a move. It's a pity that I didn't manage to take a picture of that expression and preserve it forever. There was complete silence. Mystic Bird and Feathered Serpent were silent for a long time. She didn't know what to say. She just wanted to find time to take 2 more breaths of the iced oxygen from her home. How is this F*King easy and simple? Back then, everyone else was caught off guard, and you were the only one who made the first move. You look like you don't need to worry about being stabbed in the back, as long as you stab others in the back first. It's really a little chilling to look at. Thinking about how Woodman, a dignified Fifth Order and creator, could only sullenly be reduced to ashes in the storm of countless calamities and miracles in the end. Everyone felt sincere respect and admiration for Renee. After offending the abbot, all he got was a stab in the throat. He could still continue to be alive and kicking. He was really lucky and lucky. And, most importantly, they must choose their own place to drink tea with this old tortoise in the future. Otherwise, who knew if they would sit on the crater of a volcano? Sigh, let's not talk about it. Let's not talk about it. It's all in the past. Russell waved his hand, picked up his teacup, and smiled. Everyone drink tea, drink tea. And so, during the short break in the war, the conversation continued. But not long after, Russell's cell phone on the table vibrated slightly. In the smoke-filled smoke, Russell looked down and turned the phone over again, calmly continuing the topic just now. White God. The Feathered Serpent smiled knowingly. Congratulations. Russell was silent for a moment and shook his head. No, he said, it's Black God. The Feathered Serpent was stunned for a moment, but soon understood something. He and the Mystic Bird looked at each other with a complicated expression. Sacrifice is precious. He sighed softly and didn't say anything else. The return of a Fifth Order was a big deal for all pedigrees, and there was nothing worth hiding. Celestial genealogy didn't need to keep a low profile anymore. She could stand on the stage and do whatever she wanted. Moreover, the scene in the mirror just now had been transmitted to everyone. Combined with the observation report from the abyss not long ago, everyone more or less had an idea in their hearts. It was difficult to hide their admiration. To be able to awaken the white deity using the recording method was a pleasant surprise that no one had expected. Was this the Book of Destiny? 70 years ago, when the Kingdom of Heaven fell, the first to be included in the list of targets was the Utopia's Path of Change. Black God, who didn't have any vigilance against his companions, was the first to have his soul pierced by Westcott's Pied Piper's dagger, forming a spreading contamination. The unstoppable solidification spread from the top of the Path of Change to the bottom. In order to protect all the members of the Path of Change who were corroded by solidification, the surviving White God burned all of his soul and miracles to pull Black God back from the edge of danger. But he didn't do everything. The remnant of the Philosopher's Stone mutated into the authoritative relic, Mirror of Day and Night. From then on, Pelagia's soul had become the vessel of authority, protecting countless soul fragments in the mirror and prolonging the time of her dying breath. In the long 70 years, those who ascended the Path of Change withered day by day. After losing the correction from the Source Codex and the Book of Destiny, the irredeemable impulse to self-destruct and the madness of the origin substance splitting had distorted the Path of Change. No matter how much they struggled in vain, no matter what method they used, they couldn't escape from the shadow of solidification. In the end, they could only helplessly walk into the mirror. Even Anna, who had the protection of the old godmother, couldn't escape from this terrifying shadow. 2/3 of Catherine's resentment towards Russell was because he didn't do anything. A clerk who couldn't obtain the Book of Destiny couldn't fulfill his duties. And when Huaishur returned to the celestial genealogy with the real Book of Destiny, everything changed immediately. Even if he couldn't use the correction value of the Book of Destiny, as long as it existed, all the paths that had lost their reference could find their original axes again, and they would no longer be at a loss. And most importantly, through his personal experience, The records of the mirror of day and night were once again imprinted in the Book of Destiny. The reappearance of Gaia's blood was a second chance for White God. This was the hope of redeeming everything. The path of transformation itself was the path closest to the essence of the soul. After reaching the domain of Black God and White God, they no longer had any physical bodies and could be transformed into pure soul existences. Even if they left the gamble, with the mirror of day and night as a carrier, there was still a possibility of resurrection through the spirit coffin. Everyone thought that it would be White God who would return. But this time, Pelagiah still didn't choose to be alone. Once again, she chose to sacrifice. With the thoughts, kindness, malice, and even Woodman's accumulated sins as firewood, she once again turned herself into a flame and ignited the storm of purification. She followed the existence of the heaven ladder and broke into the land of dreams. After retrieving many sealed and frozen soul fragments, she returned to the mirror of day and night. Just like that, with White God's dedication and sacrifice as the price, she replaced Black God and became the pillar of the mirror of day and night, mending many broken souls. After completely losing the hope of resurrection, she brought Vitali back from the brink of death. This was the miracle exchange by the second sacrifice. The path of transformation welcomed rebirth, and all the souls in the mirror had the hope of mending. But from then on, White God no longer existed in the world. Only Black God alone returned from the abyss, should this be a celebration or mourning. Except for celestial genealogy, no one else could understand the bitterness and pain in it. Mystic Bird patted Russell's shoulder and sighed. Everything is meaningful, isn't it? Russell sighed softly. This is Ms. Pelagiah's choice. There's nothing to sympathize with. In the darkness, there will always be someone who ignites themselves to illuminate the future for others. This is the value of sacrifice. For inheritors like us, the only thing we can do is not let their sacrifice be in vain. Don't worry about me. There are more things worth paying attention to. He held the teacup in his hand, raised his eyes, and looked at the world covered by flames and turbulence in the mirror. It's not over yet, my friends. It's not time to relax yet, even if the situation was good. But it might not be the dawn before victory. Some intuition that belonged to Loki told him that the darkest time had yet to come. Based on his understanding of the Golden Dawn, that group of bastards were definitely not people who would sit still and wait for death. On the contrary, that group of bastards must still be brewing something in this short silence, he thought, and suddenly asked casually, speaking of which, with the efficiency of the Continuation Academy, our natural enemy should be in place, right? Mystic Bird and Feathered Serpent's expressions froze. And on the image from the mirror, the vast darkness spread out like a tide. In the deepest part of the darkness, a roar like footsteps burst out. Something was coming. Before that, the moment Woodman was reduced to ashes in the storm. Fleischer watched the silver mirror leave his hand and disappear into the void before his eyes. Pelagiah's last words and advice came to his ears. It was some kind of danger warning extracted from Woodman's soul. The secret entangled in layers of arcana and curses completely self-destructed the moment it was extracted. The contents and everything related to it were ominous. However, before that, he could still distinguish the chilling aura within. There was only one vague word. Hell on earth. And the moment Fleischer looked back, he saw a figure not far away. It was looking at him. At that moment, a chill ran down his spine. But it was not the omen of death, but some kind of intrinsic disgust and resistance that absolutely could not coexist. Right in front of him, countless fragments flew through the wind and stayed in the air. The moment a certain will descended, the ashes that were burned to ashes gathered again. Restriction lifted, personality simulation installation, composition transformation reprojection, projection complete. As if turning the world into a curtain, a beam of faint light descended from the void, holding back all the fragments that could be used and gradually pieced them together. After that, a lifelike silhouette appeared. There were no distinctive features. It was hard to tell if the silhouette was male or female, and its age was unknown. Only the pupils had a faint glow that made people uneasy. When Huaishur flicked his finger without hesitation, tens of thousands of lightning bolts descended from the sky. However, after the vast destruction swept through, the distant projection still existed amidst the endless dust. There was no entity. It was just nothingness itself. "Hello, Huaishur." The thing that descended from the void curled the corner of its mouth, revealing an emotionless smile, and told him, "Nice to meet you. I am Alistair." He said, "You can call me the Fool." Chapter 1165. The world was silent, and only the whistling of the wind in the distance could be heard. The destruction and loud noises were isolated by the projection, as if a small greenhouse had been created in a world full of turbulence, fire, thunder, and storms. Just as the projection announced his identity. But in such a solemn atmosphere, Huaishur's shoulders couldn't help but tremble. He turned his head away. Puffed. Awkwardness was as sudden as farts. At this moment, even Alistair or the Fool frowned slightly and fell into confusion. They couldn't understand Huaishur's reaction. "I'm sorry, I just found out that I'm connected to the story of the reality in a strange place, so I couldn't help it." Huaishur waved his hand. "It's a pity that Woodman died early. Otherwise, the gray fog of original sin would suit you." "Well, it's okay. You can continue. Can we fast forward to the part where you give me a code name and we all have a meeting? If you have such an idea, we naturally won't refuse." The Fool ignored the mockery in Huaishur's words and said patiently, "In the current Alistair's gold sequence, death, the hanged man, and judgment are all very suitable for you. If you're willing to come, we are willing to give up our positions. If it's you, you can even fill the important vacancy of the Wheel of Fortune, right? It sounds like you all have small departments in Golden Dawn." Huaishur heard this and couldn't help but shake his head. "What is this? An inner circle within the inner circle? With this level of Russian dolls, will there be an extra hairtail at the end of the year? Since you are so generous, why don't you give up the seat under your butt and let me sit on it?" Until now, he finally faintly noticed the strange nature of Alistair himself. Ignoring the internal structure built according to the sequence of the tarot cards, it could be understood just by looking at the tower that controlled the ladder and the world that interfered with the secret instrument. It was definitely the result of carefully selected and cultivated from countless hellish tools. And the existence of Alistair and the others was a toolbox prepared for Golden Dawn to destroy the reality. And even if Golden Dawn was ignored, among all the information about the tarot cards, the most special and important thing was probably the existence of the Fool. The serial number is 0. The beginning in the tarot cards, the revelation and foundation of all phenomena and changes. Whether it was the other cards or all the changes, they were all based on the existence of the Fool himself. Until now, the Fool's card had not appeared on the chessboard. It wasn't that the other party didn't enter the arena. Instead, even the rules of the gambling house were unable to interpret and record the existence of the other party. It was like an independent record that could not be compiled again. It would not accept any changes, yet it had silently seeped into the rules. He came to Huaishur. What was he trying to do? What the hell was he? Huaishur was on guard, feeling uneasy. "My position?" The Fool sighed and said, "You can choose any of the other titles other than lover, but the Fool is not one of them." This was not because of stinginess or fear, but purely because of the difference in nature. "I am an entity formed from the characteristics of all the members of the sequence, and I constitute the deepest essence of Alistair's collective. How can I be comprehensive if I only talk about the individual?" Huaishur was silent. Only his expression gradually turned cold. The other party did not hide his existence at all and openly revealed all his secrets in front of Huaishur. The so-called the Fool was made up of all Alistair's sequences, including all the Golden Dawn's inner and outer formations, as well as the subconscious and incident records of countless members of the derivative organizations. It could be said that he was the foundation formed by the fusion of countless Alistair's consciousness. If Alistair was the hand and foot that the Golden Dawn carefully created, he was the soul that the Golden Dawn created for him. Now, the golden dawn was right in front of him. First meeting, in this short period of silence, Huaishur stared coldly at the existence in front of him. An earth-shattering explosion and fire rose in the distance. The ground shook like a carpet, causing new wrinkles and cracks. But here, everything was calm and peaceful. It was like a small haven, independent of the storm and the tide. The flickering light illuminated the eyes of both of them. It was as if death was the candle that lit the meeting between the two of them. Should I feel flattered that the fool has graced me with his presence? Huaishur looked at his neck carefully and seriously. Or do you want me to bow to your throne? What you want to give me is not a bow, Huaishur, but a sword. Just like how you won't be happy with my arrival. You just want to kill me. Let me guess, decapitation? The fool paced around casually. His bare feet stepped on the charred ground, but there was not a speck of dust on it. This was because the distance between him and this world was not just a small gap, but a long distance from here to the bottom of the abyss. I don't like lies. Lies don't have a summary. Compared to that, I prefer to be open and honest. He said, only sincerity can be the prerequisite for communication. Communication leads to understanding. Only understanding leads to recognition. Only recognition can allow us to gather together from the bottom of our hearts and work together. I want to talk to you. The fool no, Golden Dawn said so. And then, betrayal, fall, tears of blood, and death. Huaishur sneered. Doesn't this process sound familiar to you? It's like, when did it happen? What has happened is bound to happen again. The fool shook his head and looked at the world in the distance. Those are things that have happened countless times. If one day it happens to Golden Dawn, I won't be an exception. There are many things that were destined from the very beginning. Just like what you see in front of me. As he spoke, he waved his hand and dispersed the formless bubbles. The deafening roar once again exploded in their ears. Amidst the mourning of the earth and the howling of the hurricane, the solemn silhouette of the skeleton monarch and the giant of the world could be seen in the rolling thunderclouds in the distance. That was the crown one of America, the world's giant, Tlaltecatli. The embodiment of the boundless earth manifested its own great power at this moment, suppressing the flowing river of blood with its own power and colliding with the ruler. The earth collapsed under the trampling. Soon, thick and dirty liquid seeped out from the cracks. The eye of obscurity had been implanted into the 9 springs in the deepest part of the earth. The corruption and distortion of the pollution source continued to spread, climbing up the ankles of the giant of the world. It continued to corrode and penetrate, peeling off a huge amount of earth and stone, miraculously dying. But new destruction descended from the dome. Endless natural disasters were created under the mobilization of the storm totem, shrouding the entire region. The silhouette of Osiris rose from the storm. Everywhere it passed, everything was dyed red with blood. The corona held up by Fusang was constantly shaking, gradually dimming and shrinking inwards. The majestic halo of the solar almanac clashed in the darkness, crushing the path of bones of the fallen nation. But more distortion continued to spread under the power of the withered king's decree. Between the dim stars, fissures were slowly extending inwards. The war was still going on. It would not stop because of Huaishur's victory, nor would it slow down because of the arrival of dawn. Instead, it welcomed the full counterattack of the abyss. How spectacular! The fool sighed. The sky is broken. The earth is collapsing. The ashes of bones and the smell of blood are floating in the wind. Do you see? The world has become like hell. Everything will be destroyed one day, no matter how noble the ideal or how big the world is. Isn't this what you created? Huaishur sneered. You started the war with your own hands and destroyed everything with your own hands. Why are you crying in silence? No, you shouldn't say that, right? The fool turned back and looked at him, helplessly spreading his hands. Perhaps we have a part to play in this, but the Golden Dawn is far from qualified to be the root of all evil. Besides, isn't war created by both sides? He said, 2 equal sides, fighting and killing each other, using all means to destroy the enemy and protect themselves. Only then is it called war. Otherwise, is only slaughter and destruction. Huaisher couldn't help but want to laugh at the profound words and the countless riddles hidden within. No, it should be said that he almost vomited his dinner from last night. Playing this game in front of me? I have stopped being cold 800 years ago. Next time, please change to a beautiful big sister skin, okay? At least I will give you some face and waver a little. Could it be that I have misunderstood? Huaisher asked. The Golden Dawn went through so much trouble, stirring up trouble in hell, and in the end created a poet to describe all of this to me in beautiful words, so that in the future it will be recorded in the annals of history. Well, that's good, but that's not important. The fool shook his head casually, not caring about Huaisher's mockery. But have you really not wondered? Why poetry? Why is it that both sides are equal? Above the countless dust clouds, the fool suddenly turned back and asked, why can the realm of reality fight against so many hells in just a few thousand years of history? How is it that after so many wars of the worlds, the solitary realm can survive until now? He asked, relying on the so-called sacrifice? But is sacrifice omnipotent? When a chip is burned, only the ashes of another chip will be left. But why can you fight against the abyss? Huaisher coldly looked at him. He was unmoved. That's right, why? He nodded without any fluctuation in his emotions. That makes sense. Why have I never thought of such a question before? Can you please tell me? It can't be that you were born in the realm of reality and entered the abyss to be a double agent and a traitor, right? Who would have thought that for such a long time, it was actually you who had been silently dragging hell back and protecting us? It was really lamentable. As expected of the Golden Dawn, it was admirable. Do you want me to give you a medal on behalf of the realm of performance and make 2 banners? He paused for a moment. The fake smile on his face disappeared, and he was expressionless again. Or should we quickly skip the boring part of the argument and start the fight to the death? The sound of the 7 tides echoed. The blade pierced the ground between the two of them, cut through those hypocritical attitudes and words that were not worth mentioning. Cold killing intent rose from the blade, but the fool was still unmoved. Instead, he showed a look of realization and surprise. Is this the art of forging? It's a perfect match for the nature of your soul. The fool sincerely praised. It seems that you have indeed obtained the complete inheritance of the Sunmaker. In time, the results of the Sunmaker will definitely be revived in your hands. Just like that, he stretched out his hand to touch the blade of the sword, ignoring the sharp tide formed from the boundless water vapor on the blade. His palm was instantly crushed into pieces. It was cut off at the wrist, but he didn't regret it. Apart from that, you must have obtained more, right? The representative skills of the 13 kings of forging, the blueprint and framework of the Gear Emperor, and even the machine of immortality? He looked at Huaisher's right hand where the forging furnace used to be, but there was no greed in his expression, only calmness. Why didn't the Astronomy Society obtain the greatest treasure, Huaisher? Such an amazing creation. Why is it just shelved? Dozens of eras ago, when Qing Jing died, the Village of Dusk exhausted all its potential. All the kings of forging used all their methods. And finally, with the help of the workshop masters, they were able to complete the machine of immortality. But now, their achievements have been easily surpassed by you all and left behind. In an ancient era, an entire world had nurtured the largest and most advanced civilization over hundreds of thousands of years. The treasures they obtained after sacrificing everything to the Astronomy Society were only techniques that could be used as a reference. Moreover, this was only one example. There were countless similar examples: the vast habitat's art of reproduction, Luo Jing's white map, Hui Haizar planting, and the great idea of Nirvana City. Those things to the Astronomy Society were just collections to show off their heritage. Countless dead people spent their life's efforts, but the final crystallization was abandoned by you like a pair of worn-out shoes. Why? There's only one reason, and that is because we are the Astronomy Society. Ha! How arrogant, how great, and how pitiful. The fool grinned and suddenly laughed. A look of mockery and disdain that only belonged to humans appeared on that lofty face. Why sure? Can you please tell me? Why did the modern realm, in just tens of thousands of years, and the Astronomy Society, in less than a few hundred years, surpass the achievements at the end of all eras? Why was the modern realm able to fight against the ruler of hell, who had lasted from countless disasters to this day? Could it be that compared to the worlds of the past countless eras, you are the only special lucky ones? But when has this world ever been so generous? Miracles are conserved. Why sure, everything has a price. Now, the fool hovered above the shattered land and asked the successor of the utopia again, where did this prosperity that you are so proud of come from? Chapter 1166. There was a sudden silence. There was only the sound of the wind echoing in the distance. Huaisher was silent and did not answer. But he was not thinking. Instead, he was in a trance. It was as if he had heard a similar question somewhere before. It was as if he had thought about it countless times, but he did not notice it at all. It was a strange feeling. He could almost hear the laughter of a certain black-hearted woman. He could almost imagine her lying on the sofa and watching TV. He looked at himself in the picture, just like an invigilator looking at a student walking into the examination room. He looked at the uneasiness before he wrote the paper, the fear during the exam, and the confusion when he started writing. But now, when the fool's question was placed in front of him, he found that the uneasiness and anxiety in his heart were gradually dissipating and disappearing. Only calmness was left, and that was the only answer. Prosperity would not come out of nowhere, and prosperity would not exist for no reason. In alchemy, it was said that miracles were conserved, and there was no such thing as a miracle that would appear out of thin air. Then, what was the reason that allowed the reality to continue to this day, allowed everything to prosper, allowed the Astronomy Society to surpass countless eras in the past, and allowed it to be an enemy of the abyss? When the last layer of window paper was pierced through, the answer was already obvious. Hell. The sudden realization made the fool's eyes move. He did not expect him to be so close to the answer. But then, he became more and more expectant. It seems that you have understood, right? Other than hell, where else can provide such endless consumption? Other than the abyss, where else can you greedily demand? In the past, the Astronomy Society built the human world on top of hell, but it was not enough. They wanted to build the kingdom of heaven even higher. The greater the desire and expectation for tomorrow, the deeper you will go into hell, and the deeper you will go for all living beings, for hope, for ideal. Everything under the solemn crown is a laughable reality. It is this arrogance that has brought about today's evil consequences. He paused for a moment and then asked with pity, even you, why sure, didn't realize that something was wrong? Could it be that you weren't curious? Why did the abyss tide happen? Why did the War of the Worlds, which only exists as a monster siege mechanism in the game, appear in reality? Why? He paused for a moment and asked maliciously, in all the previous eras, such a ridiculous thing has never been recorded? The ground beneath the fool's feet trembled slightly. Dust and fine iron sand rose into the air, establishing a foundation that was dozens of meters long and wide, right between the two of them. Then, when the fool waved his hand, layers of darkness surged out. In the darkness, countless branches and leaves sprouted, extended upward, and turned into pillars. Then, under the support of the branches, the star-like matrix sphere grew gradually from the tiny light. In the end, it glowed brightly. Such a simple and clear structure. It revealed the relationship between the present realm and hell to Huaisher. Without the existence of the three major seals, the heavens and the earth were like a fetal membrane. A thick barrier enveloped the realm, and countless rays of light that represented the gods were operating within it. Under the acceleration of time, by billions of times, the reality rapidly grew, then gradually weakened and shrunk. After countless rays of light dimmed, the matrix sphere shrunk inwards. The crack cracked. Then, the darkness rose like a tide, extending upward along the branches and seeping into the sphere of the generation realm, accelerating its collapse and dissipation. Finally, everything returned to the darkness that was like soil, until a new seed sprouted from the darkness that represented the abyss. Light reappeared. Look, this is the cycle of the world. After the broken model, the fool's face appeared. There will be no hell, no deep erosion, and no other external effects. Natural birth and death, returning to dust, and then a new seed will grow. This is the normal cycle of ecology. Everything is peaceful and worry-free. Why, sure, why are you so bleak? After a short pause, he smiled, revealing his hideous teeth, and laughed mockingly. You must know that the abyss tide only appears when the realm ushers in annihilation. The tide from the depths of the abyss rises and swallows everything again. The war of the worlds only occurs when the world is destroyed. The power in the depths will completely disintegrate the world and return it to the abyss. The phantom of the fool appeared behind Huai Shi, lowered his head, and whispered softly in his ear. The directorate will not tell you, and neither will Russell. This is a secret that all lineages are keeping. The world you want to protect has already reached the end of its life hundreds of years ago. Now, the time of destruction has come again. The intangible palm pressed on Huai Shi's shoulder, weightless. But it was like a mountain range, not allowing him to escape. The spreading chill froze his heart and soul, causing Huai Shi's fingers to tremble, and he could not control himself. When the last piece of the puzzle was sent out from the fool's hand, countless clues finally connected. Cause and effect formed a truth that did not need to be questioned, and there were no lies. About the abyss, about hell, about the present realm, everything he had seen, and the war of destruction that had already arrived. The present realm had already ushered in the end of the cycle. No, from the beginning, this world was already full of cracks. The fall of the gods caused the present realm to lose its walls, which caused Gaia to be eroded by the abyss, and finally ushered in a distortion. And the death of Gaia caused the present realm's structure to be on the verge of collapse. The tide of the abyss answered the call, bringing destruction. In order to continue, in order to resist the destruction, they did not hesitate to go deeper into hell. What has already happened is bound to happen again, isn't it? The fool sighed, just like what the gods did in the past. The Astronomy Society did the same thing, and even more thoroughly. In order to develop, in order to continue, they did not hesitate to completely destroy the world they are in. This is the essence of the world creation plan. Under the fool's control, the world in the huge model continued to be born and destroyed. New seeds sprouted again and again, growing weakly, glowing dimly, and then immediately disappearing again. Extracting the power of hell, artificially catalyzing the abyss, and after a long wait, once again creating the present realm of the next era. Draining the pond to catch the fish, pulling the seedlings to help them grow, and endless excavation. Constantly repeating again and again, eating up an entire world, then another world, and another world after that. He grinned and laughed mockingly. Through the cover of countless correction values, suppressing the growth of the distortion, barely maintaining the glory of the past, gradually rotting and swelling. This is the so-called present realm. This is the big lie that the Astronomy Association is telling everyone. You are already in hell. Why sure, the fool said coldly. There is no need for the abyss. You have created a hell on earth with no future. At that moment, Huaishir seemed to have returned to the cold universe again. Just above the desolate Helios, Publius' laughter lingered in his ears. And his last words, to kill something in exchange for my own continuation, I am just doing the same thing as you and the Astronomy Society. In the same quagmire, how can you despise me? Huaishir? That guy Publius. Huaishir closed his eyes, gritted his teeth, and exhaled a breath of anger. I've actually fallen to the point where I have to be compared with that kind of thing. If you're trying to provoke me, congratulations. You've succeeded, the fool. He reached out, grabbed the illusory projection on his shoulder, and flung the fool's hand away. Or are you hoping to shake me with this? Aren't you too naive? Ha! Ha ha! I see you, why sure. The real you are indeed the successor of the utopia. Mathers was not wrong. The fool laughed, overjoyed. He did not care about the contempt and arrogance, but instead rejoiced. What if I tell you such a dreamlike happy life will eventually come to an end? Do you think the war of the worlds can destroy the present realm? Huaisher looked at him coldly. It was useless the first time, and it will still be useless the second time. We will win, as long as the Astronomy Society still exists. But even without the war of the worlds and the abyssal tide, the present realm can no longer exist. The fool spread his hands and replied bluntly, Is the world creation plan omnipotent? Or is it that there is no price to pay for each birth and destruction? The Astronomy Society will constantly catalyze the birth of new present realms. But why is it that the duration of each present realm is gradually decreasing? There's only one answer. Every creation and destruction of a world is a destruction of a cycle. Every time a new world is catalyzed, it will only be weaker than the previous one. Why do you think the Continuation Academy is so impatient to restart the bet? Isn't it because of the present realm's origin left in the Gaia fragment? But how long can such a small amount of origin allow this meaningless creation to continue? 200 years? 300 years? One day, the abyss will collapse, and there will be no more new worlds sprouting. According to our estimates, after at most 1,200 years, there will be no more new present realms. At that time, what awaits you is eternal desolation, eternal darkness, and eternal hell. The fool's face suddenly appeared in front of him, and he warned coldly, Everything must return to normal. Why sure, if your world is not destroyed, there will be no future to speak of. All of this is destined. In the brief silence, Huaisher looked at him. His shoulders trembled slightly. His lungs twitched. Feeling the heartfelt absurdity and the mockery from hell, he couldn't help laughing so hard that tears almost came out. So the fool. Huaisher sneered, unable to understand the comical feeling. This is the reason why Golden Dawn wants to represent the Abyss as a radical environmental protection organization to destroy the present realm? For a blue and clean Earth? How ridiculous! No, it was already at the level of embarrassment. Huaisher used to think that they were just lunatics with problems in their brains, but he didn't expect that not only were they mentally ill, but they were also sick. As traitors, they abandoned the utopia as elements of destruction and wanted to destroy the world. The reason was actually to protect the environment for a more beautiful future. On the contrary, the roar came out of nowhere. It echoed in the silence. It was the fool shouting, refuting Huaisher's guess and correcting this fallacy. The calmness in his expression had disappeared at some point, and it was replaced by indescribable fanaticism and pride, as well as a certain familiar trait, a certain madness that belonged to the utopia. What we are doing is what the Astronomy Society has always been doing, Huaisher. He leaned closer and stared into Huaisher's eyes, telling him word by word, Destroy everything, devour everything, even if the world is destroyed. Everything that belongs to us will continue. The existence of Golden Dawn is to fulfill the mission of the utopia, to explore the way we humans exist in hell. Behind him, more projections appeared. More Alistair. Some were old, some were young, some were gloomy, some were calm. They were all different. But every one of them was looking at Huaisher. There were more projections. The scene from the Land of Dreams. In that huge city, distant figures gradually became clear, and their spiritual postures appeared. They were in the abyss. In hell, they seemed to be solidifiers, but they also had the same aura as those Alistairs. But each of them was like a human. It made Huaisher shudder. What the hell is that? This is us, Huaisher. The fool's mouth curled up. This is the main body of the Alistair plan. He proudly announced to the opponent in front of him. This is the great result created with all of us Alistairs as the cornerstone, the great victory of mankind. It's in hell, in the abyss. For 70 years, no, As early as 70 years ago, or even earlier, we have been trying. We have exhausted all methods, explored all the solidification structures and sublimation prototypes, tried everything, and finally found the path of glory in hell. This is a human, why sure? The fool laughed loudly. A human who can survive in hell after leaving the present realm. A human who belongs to our new generation. A human who is truly created by hell. This is the so-called chosen one. Even if they lost the present realm, there was no need to feel pity. Even if they fell into the abyss, they could still continue this glory to the end of eternity. Exhausting all of his wisdom, sparing no expense, exhausting all of his heart's blood, he finally found a great future in hell. The Alisters, who were known by the tarot cards, were only representatives selected from among them. They were the true chosen ones, the ones who were truly chosen by the world. Didn't you witness the technology when you were in Doomsday, why sure? The fool cheerfully reminded him. That was just a clinical test. Don't worry, our technology has long been mature, and there are no side effects at all. After referring to the existence of things like spirits, we supplemented the soul structure of the sublimator and the solidifier to ensure the individual's will, while maintaining the previous physical characteristics and potential. Moreover, there is no longer the limit of lifespan and the restraint of the three major seals. Forever, farewell to death. Even the power of the elements of destruction can be used without any burden. Those forces that once destroyed us can't kill us. We are the true rulers. How long can your world last if you blindly linger on? Hundreds of years in an instant. Once the present realm ends, nothing will be left. The fool said decisively, what has happened will happen again. The world will inevitably be destroyed. This is the truth. In the cycle of the whole realm, the narrow present realm is just a process. Only hell is the end. Do you know how the king of hell was born? Why sure? From the sea of thunder to the fallen country, to the eye of darkness and mother of stone that have now declined, as well as those workshop owners who haven't matured. Why can they be above those rulers? This was because, without exception, all of them were once behemoths like the Astronomical Society. But in the end, when the destruction came, they didn't resist hell. Instead, they chose to comply with this destiny, embrace the abyss, and live forever. The endless hell is their paradise, don't you see? What the Astronomy Club is doing now is just a futile effort. They rely on countless sacrifices to constantly delay the arrival of that day. But sacrifices are useless. In the end, nothing will be left. Only when there is still vitality in the present realm can more power be transformed, so that more people can live in hell. No matter how many times the present realm changes, we will become the overlords of the abyss. We are the true rulers of this world. The fool spread his arms. We will be the true king of hell. That hoarse voice echoed between heaven and earth, flying into the distance, towards the domain within the fragment. It reverberated among the stars. It didn't hide its ambition at all, proudly announcing its achievements, showing all the existences the great path of the present realm. The existence called Golden Dawn laughed loudly, shrouding the starry sky with its shadow. To the world, to everyone, to show the glory of the end of hell. It made everyone look up in shock. Unbelievable. Even in the hall where the gambling house was located, cheers and applause rang out. You actually want to compete with the fallen country? The withered king looked down at Mathers and nodded approvingly. Very good, very good. Mathers, I will look forward to that day. Such fun is always common. You can come and challenge me. What do you think, great lord? Although unrealistic, your courage is commendable. The great lord glanced down, not caring. If you are not afraid of being crushed into dust by this great power that has been passed down for countless eras, you can give it a try. That day will come. Mathers nodded reservedly. He was still calm. And in the decision-making room, after the sudden silence, the noise and arguments that couldn't be suppressed spread out, gradually becoming noisy. Chaotic shouts and hurried footsteps came from outside the door. Chaos. Along with the announcement of the Golden Dawn, waves that seemed to have substance spread out toward everyone who was watching this duel, brewing a dark and gloomy torrent. But at the top, it was dead silent. Russell stared at the screen expressionlessly. Only a wisp of smoke slowly drifted on the cigarette at his fingertips, like a thin veil, hiding Loki's anger behind the scenes. "You really boast shamelessly, you bunch of trash." Just like that, the indistinguishable whispers were annihilated in the silence. On the screen, the prideful and solemn announcement was still going on. In the chaotic battlefield, in a world that was on the verge of collapse, burning ashes fell from the wind. The earth wailed. In the spreading destruction, the power of Golden Dawn slowly rose. From the beginning of the battle, the long time that had been silently accumulating turned into darkness, dense and dense, swallowing the stars bit by bit. It made everything return to darkness. Just like that, the fool raised his head and glanced at all the scouts looking in disdain. He reached out his hand to Huai Shi. "If you really want to protect the present, then come to our side, Huai Shi." The fool sincerely invited, "You should understand that what I said to you is not a lie, not a lie. Only we are the orthodox of the Astronomical Association. We are the utopia. Only we are the right side." A short silence came. Huai Shi did not speak. He just looked at him as if he was thinking, silent. But in this suffocating silence, he seemed to be distracted. No one knew what he was thinking. He did not pay attention to the invitation that was close at hand. He raised his head and looked at the gradually darkening sky. It was as if through a chessboard he could see the countless distant hells and the huge abyss, everything in the darkness. "I really don't understand." Huai Shi asked softly, "Why does hell exist in this world?" Before the Battle of Worlds began, while searching far away in the Scar area, Huai Shi had asked Tangi a similar question in her dream. Why couldn't hell be eradicated? Why couldn't so many sacrifices make up for the abyss? But he didn't get a positive answer. Just like the countless questions he had in the past, he didn't answer them. He only got more questions that confused him. Tangi seemed to always be leading him to think about something through various methods, but she didn't tell him what the question was or where the answer was. She looked forward to Huai Shi having his own answer. Or rather, she hoped that Huai Shi could be prepared for the moment he knew the answer. It was like trekking on a path in the fog in the night. He blindfolded and let her hold his hand as they moved forward on the single-plank bridge. Occasionally, there would be confusing echoes in the fog. Occasionally, under the blindfold, he would see unexpected afterimages. He would ask questions, but he wouldn't get an answer. That wasn't important. What was important was that he needed to move forward. You have to have courage, Huai Shi, to face this world. Now, when the blindfold was taken off and the answer was revealed, you don't need to be afraid. So this is the original sin of the utopia. Tangi, Huai Shi sighed and felt sad because of this. But he couldn't help but laugh because of this. If you love others more than yourself, then you won't love anyone anymore. What you love is only nothingness. The so-called selflessness was coldness behind it. After benevolence was reversed, it became cruelty. After trust was shaken, only hatred was left. After one's ideals fell, one would walk into hell, searching for the existence of dawn in the eternal darkness. How laughable! In this silence, his shoulders trembled. He covered his face and couldn't help but mock. He was overjoyed. In the stone marrow hall, in front of the television, Tangi had already stood up and approached the huge screen. She reached out and touched the few pixels that formed Huai Shi's face. Her eyes moved closer, filled with anticipation. It was like seeing a seed germinating in the soil. Her heart was filled with joy. Very good, Huai Shi, you'll never be disappointed. Now, tell me your answer. Your answer, the choice that belongs to you. Thus, when the hoarse laughter gradually dissipated, Huai Shi raised his face again. He looked at the fool in front of him. He looked at the so-called Golden Dawn. Without hiding it, he nodded his head in approval. What you said is really good, the fool. Your dreams are indeed lofty and full of the future. It's so beautiful that it's intoxicating. Perhaps you're on the right side. It's simply irrefutable. He reached out and grabbed the fool's palm without hesitation. He used so much force that it was as if he was holding the future. Very. The fool smiled and was about to say something. But he saw a burst of iron light. Boom! The sound of the tides of the seven seas surged. The mighty torrent converged and splashed out along with the blade. From top to bottom, it slashed down. In an instant, the eyesore's head was shattered, the projection of the void was completely torn apart, and all the illusions that didn't exist here were wiped out. Amidst the rising dust and the mess on the ground, only Huaishur was holding his sword. He asked expressionlessly, "But what does this have to do with me?" Just like that, he gave the answer without holding back in the slightest and in his own way. He didn't leave any room for negotiation. Huaishur, the projection of the fool, reappeared, and his smile gradually disappeared. "I originally had high hopes for you. That proves that you're blind." Huaishur glanced at him and shrugged. "I'm sorry. I don't have the burden of being an idol or having an image. It's normal for me to collapse. But on the bright side, you didn't buy a handshake ticket, right? Rounding it up, you even got a free ride. Why are you so disappointed? Don't you know how to think?" The fool questioned, "Do you think I would lie to you about such things? Lying or the truth doesn't matter in the first place." Huaishur shook his head. "What you said is very likely right, but why should I listen to my opponent? Perhaps the present realm will eventually be destroyed. Perhaps you have big dreams. There is indeed a big future in hell. But this has nothing to do with me wanting to kill you," he replied sincerely. "I just want to kill all of you very seriously. There are no other factors mixed in. I hope you don't misunderstand. After losing your ideals, what you do is unrighteous." The fool was furious. "What right do you have to call yourself the successor of the Utopia? Then let's change the name. It's fine to call it the Paradise Prince Club. If you join now, I'll give you a membership card. Anyway, I don't care, and the others won't care." Huaishur asked in confusion. "Besides, since I'm unrighteous, why would there be a crown on me? That's just a dead end to destruction." The fool roared. "When destruction comes, no new world will be born. The Utopia is obsessed with dreams, the Directorate is obsessed with power, and the Continuation Academy is just a group of walking corpses. Why can't you go and see the future? People live in the present. Who can think so much?" Huaishur raised her head and impatiently interrupted the chatter. "You guys are the only ones who are so annoying. The present world still exists, and it will continue to exist. No matter what the cycle is, we are the protagonists of the current world. As long as we haven't given up, no one can sentence us to death. No one has the right to tell us that we have to be destroyed." Huh. It's the same trick again, and the same disdainful tone. The fool's expression gradually became ferocious. "Even if you can live a prosperous life and die peacefully, you only have time. But what about your descendants? What about the future? One day, when they face destruction, what right do you have to call yourself a hero?" "Of course I do," Huaishur replied arrogantly. "Even if it's destruction, so what? In addition to the ideals, isn't there also this ideal karma? If the ancestors have burned up in order to protect all of this, then the descendants have to take over this responsibility and continue to fight. To kill everything that wants to kill us, even if it's hell. Otherwise, what's the point of giving birth to that thing?" The blade slashed down again, shattering the fool's projection. Decapitation, but the head that flew in the air rejoined the body again. The furious fool reached out and grabbed Huaishur's collar, roaring, "We could have survived in the abyss. They would have had a great future. Surviving is just a solidified monster, right? That option was never needed from the beginning." Huaishur's blade slashed down again, without the slightest pause. Then he reached out and pried open the hand in front of his chest, casually threw it on the ground, and crushed it into pieces. "Don't be so full of yourself, fool." He interrupted the fool's projection, not wanting to waste any more time. "This stable world is not given by hell, it's created by us. Its light is not a gift from hell, it's us who lit it. It has survived to this day not because of your kindness, but because of countless sacrifices. So, there's no need for flowery words. There's no need to talk about those considerations and trade-offs, the so-called future. In the end, that's just an excuse. He stared coldly at the fool's reborn projection and told him word by word, using it to hide your weakness. Ridiculous. The fool waved his hand, and an invisible gravitational force burst out, forcibly cutting off the surging tide. He sighed in disappointment. You don't understand our sacrifice at all. Sacrifice? Huaisher laughed. That's not a sacrifice, fool. That's just yielding and enduring. You've admitted defeat. So, you'd rather choose the pain of hell than face failure. The solemn sword stabbed down again. It was nailed into the soil. It once again established the axis of heaven and earth, the foundation of all things. It caused the stars to revolve brilliantly under this will, causing all things to let out a mighty roar. Countless rays of light scattered down, illuminating the dim world once again. It illuminated countless angry eyes on the battlefield. Above the burning white tower, the emblem of the utopia was still hanging high. From the countless outposts, the souls did not hesitate at all. They were still performing their duties under the waves of destruction. They could not even be bothered to listen to the boring words in the wind, even if hell was heavy and the destruction was endless. But everything did not waver. Do you see this world? Huaisher asked indifferently. So many hells, so many wars, so many people who have sacrificed and died. Until they died, they were protecting their world from harm. But you don't want to believe that they can win. He looked at the fool's face and told him word by word. Long before the battle began, you've already admitted defeat, betraying your companions, abandoning their lifelong dreams, and denying their sacrifice. You think you can decide the fate of this world, using the so-called future as an excuse to stand in front of me and tell me, Huaisher, come to our side, we can be friends. But we've never been friends. Not in the past, not in the present, and not in the future 70 years ago. When you chose to betray me, you were already my enemy. At this moment, the deep voice rose into the sky and spread under the symphony of the stars, causing this resolute will to descend into the mortal world and announce to everything. Now listen up, the fool or Alistair or Mathers, Westcott, Bennett, the heretic king, all of you from the Golden Dawn. There's also the Sea of Thunder, the Fallen Country, the Bulsh * T Workshop Master, the Trashy Eye of Obscurity, and the Mother of Stone that you've never heard of. Including the so-called ranchers, the so-called Pied Piper, and other things that are not worth mentioning, the cold voice echoed on the battlefield, in the hall outside the chessboard, in front of the screen in the Stone Marrow Hall, and in the noisy decision-making room. In hell, in the abyss. The voice full of contempt echoed in everyone's ears. I don't know what the future of this world will be, and I don't know how everything will turn out, but there's one thing that won't change. No matter what happens, no matter where, the war between you and us will never stop. In this world, only one side can continue to exist. The right side. The clear words burst out in the thunder, ravaging everyone's eardrums from above, shattering all the flukes, and coldly suppressing all the wavering souls. With the will of Huaisher, with the determination of the utopia. As the agent of the Astronomy Society, it was announced to the entire realm. There would be no gentleness, and there would be no ambiguous compromises. To pour oil into the flames and deliver firewood to the war. To declare this determination and noble ideal that had never been extinguished to the abyss. In the roars, in the cheers, in the shouts, and in the fanatical calls, the stars revolved, and the darkness could not swallow the brilliant light. The darker the place, the more dazzling the light that had lasted until now. It could no longer be ignored. Then come, partner. Osiris's laughter echoed under the night sky. The god of steel rose into the starry sky, the sword of judgment burning fiercely, and slashed at the rulers in front of him again. There were more, those huge figures, those who ascended under the burning stars, the dead who returned from hell, and the living who had yet to bow to the abyss, and more legions who were fighting and fighting. The forest-like array pushed forward, as if the iron wall had been cast again. The once cheerful songs and encouraging horns were blown again into the distance. This world that had lost the utopia still did not admit defeat. The glorious light had never dimmed, even if there was only the abyss and destruction outside the illuminated home. Dear friends, now let us confront hell. Once again, we stepped onto the battlefield to destroy everything. Chapter 1167. The burning flames spread over the earth, but it was as if the night was also ignited. Countless stars moved on the battlefield, casting a cold and cruel light, reorganizing the formation, violently smoothing out the wrinkles on the earth and mending the cracks in the sky. Once again, the broken world was connected into a whole. Under the declaration of war, the haze cast by the golden dawn had been violently covered, replaced by an unprecedented wave of counterattacks. It was as if the whole world was shouting towards hell. The sonorous sound of iron echoed in the abyss. But outside the chessboard, there was dead silence in the hall. The unrelated participants trembled, not daring to make sound. There were even more players who had turned their scarlet eyes to the present. The air had completely frozen. Even the sound of breathing was strangled in the lungs. Only majestic wills descended from the abyss one after another, raising projections. The rulers from the endless depths cast cold gazes at the overconfident challengers. And in this extreme cold formed by malice, other than the withered king whose eyes were shining with joy, even the throne in the center of the hall that reached into the clouds cast a gaze that seemed to have substance. It seemed to be surprised, looking down attentively. After a long time, the Grand Lord looked at the other side of the chessboard. Although his strength is still a bit lacking, this arrogant look is more or less like you all back then, he said. You found a good successor, Marcus. Yes. The old man nodded, pressed the blanket on his knees, and chuckled softly, stronger than me. The Grand Lord was silent for a moment, then shook his head. Such a talent, bound by the present, can only walk to the end in vain. It is indeed lamentable. Otherwise, in time, he may not be unable to have a place here, right? In the wheelchair, the dizzy diplomat froze for a moment, then immediately coughed and laughed strangely, unable to breathe, saliva almost dripping from the corner of his mouth. Great monarch, we've come here to destroy everything. Marcus looked up at the clouds and asked, a broken chair destined to be meaningless. What is there to pity? At that moment, silence came again. Countless projections suddenly raised their heads and looked over. The ruler no longer concealed his anger and bloodlust. Those scarlet eyes were filled with a viciousness and malice that had been tempered from the abyss. But the old man didn't seem to hear it. He just calmly raised his chin and let Nakajima wipe the saliva from the corner of his mouth. Right in front of him, the Go players blocked the cold wave with expressionless faces. Welcome the storm from the abyss. The atmosphere was tense, but at this moment, no one dared to act presumptuously in front of the great monarch's imperial entourage. Only after a long time did the sound of regretful thunder come from the sky again. So be it, Marcus. The great dark monarch waved his hand and generously pardoned them. Your ideals are indeed commendable, but unfortunately, using destruction to meet destruction, using death to stop death. Even if you win the abyss, you will only obtain hell. Your end is not in the future, but in front of your eyes. Let's watch. Thunder Grand Monarch knocked on the armrest, and the low rumble reverberated in everyone's ears, causing the coldness to evaporate and the ferocity to disappear. All the restlessness in the hall was swept away. An invisible force once again nailed everyone back to their positions. There was no room for error. The bed is not over yet. Inside the bed, the war had already burned every inch of the earth and sky. Everything was shrouded in destruction and flames. The fighting started again, and under the advancement of the realm, towards hell. Under the cold stars, only the projection of the fool was quietly looking at everything that was happening in the underworld. Understand? Why sure. You always seem to love those things that will destroy you. The fool said, such as wine, such as freedom, such as the so-called ideals. The only response he got was a burst of thunder. In the night sky above Huaishi's head, countless sharp blades fell, wedged into the earth, nailed into the broken rocks, and grew and spread like wildflowers after the rain. In this way, the last of the hypocrisy was torn apart, and the noisy voices came to an abrupt end. The intermission is over. The fool, show some backbone as a golden dawn, and stop saying those disgusting words. Huaishir pulled out the sword of 7 seas and coldly urged, "Now, pick up your weapon and face me. Or, let me cut off the thing on your neck." The fool was silent. He closed his eyes in disappointment. "Okay," he said, "since you want to protect your world, then go and ask this world yourself." Under the piercing and tearing of countless sharp blades, the fool's final projection gradually dissipated. He returned to the abyss. But before he left, he turned back and took one last look at the ignorant mortal world. His smile was cold and mocking. "Look at this world. Do you want to protect you?" At that moment, the remaining projection completely disappeared without a trace. Dead silence arrived. In the distance, in the domain of hell, endless disasters gathered into a tide, startled like birds. The darkness that light could not dispel erupted like a geyser, surging violently like a volcano, rolling and spreading towards the mortal world. In an instant, it spread along the river of blood and the path of bones, like a raging torrent running on the river. In the deepest part of the earth, the 9 springs of hell dug out by the gloomy, I was completely swallowed and dissolved by the terrifying darkness in an instant, causing the darkness from the abyss to expand and rise into the sky. Like countless hands, it clenched the dark clouds from a sea of thunder and extracted endless power from within. Ignoring the large number of whales, in an instant, all the worthless things were vaporized into dust. There was only darkness. The darkness that seemed to have substance spread towards the present. In the seemingly eternal deep darkness, the loud rumbling of a behemoth echoed, trampling on the earth. The stars shook and their light dimmed. Countless ear-piercing alarms rang in Huaishir's ears, and the error data from the great secret instrument kept popping up one after another. In the blink of an eye, 1/3 of the framework in the domain, shrouded in darkness, lost its connection and disappeared. Then, another 1/3 disappeared. In just a few seconds, when Huaishir looked up, he could only see the last glimmer of the stars in the depths of the darkness being swallowed up, never to be seen again. Only the huge silhouette gradually revealed a strange posture from the deep darkness. When the ear-piercing cries broke out from everyone's soul and ravaged all their wills, a dazzling light lit up in the night sky, swallowed up by the darkness. Like a crown, like a halo, like an astronomical phenomenon, a brilliant stream of light slowly rose from hell, outlining a flawless, perfect circle. The crown was placed on the head of the strange behemoth, filling the night sky, causing countless cracks to appear on the 5-layer structure of the great secret instrument. In a short moment, the stars of humanity were shaking and quickly dimming. Only countless faint lights were left, like candles in the wind. Ring of Rebirth? In the decision-making room, the feathered serpent turned its head stiffly and looked at Russell with its eyes wide open, as if it wanted to eat someone. "That thing, you guys actually made it? How would I know?" Russell smoked a cigarette and said in a muffled voice, "Before the fall of Heavenly State, I was just a tool. For this kind of high-level secret of the research department, it's enough to be able to hear some rumors. It's impossible to know everything, right?" Although his words were evasive, his gloomy expression revealed the anger and haze in Russell's heart. More than 90 years ago, long before the official rise of Heavenly State, in order to complete the 4th project, the 3 major departments of the Astronomy Association worked together and conquered countless important prerequisites and secret instruments. However, the system of Heavenly State was really too huge, and even the Astronomy Association couldn't rely on themselves to complete such a huge pioneering work. They had to seek help from the 5 major systems and conduct joint research and development on many projects. Among them, with the American system, there was a crucial attempt, the so-called Ring of Rebirth. And the target was the creator of the American system, the White Crown King. In the golden age of the Gods' Union, the White Crown King, who had seen the risks and consequences but was unable to rein in the horse at the edge of the cliff, chose to deviate from his duties and start a new furnace and door, cutting off the connection between himself and the Holy Spirit system. However, even so, he still couldn't isolate the erosion and spying from the rancher. He had long been entangled with the Holy Spirit system. After the fall of the gods, the expected consequences finally came. In the abyss, the eternal God constantly called out to the delicacies that had left the plate, waiting for him to enter hell and return to his paradise. For this, the White Crown King had made countless attempts. After he helped the Utopia lay the skeleton of the path of original sin, he regretfully discovered that he still couldn't find a way to delay the erosion. Under the double threat of solidification and distortion, the helpless White Crown King could only choose the last method, which was to seal himself and enter an endless sleep, infinitely delaying the day of his fall. Under such circumstances, the plan that was launched was to liberate the White Crown King from his predicament, the Ring of Rebirth. This plan had encountered many obstacles from the beginning. If they couldn't completely solve the existence of the rancher, then they were destined to not be able to remove the root cause. All other attempts were proven to be nothing more than drinking poison to quench their thirst in subsequent evaluations. Therefore, they had to take another step back and change to a way to temporarily awaken the White Crown King. Unfortunately, it wasn't completed until the fall of the Kingdom of Heaven. There was only one prototype that hadn't even been tested. Everyone thought that it had been destroyed in that collapse, and even Russell had completely forgotten about it. However, they didn't expect that it had been taken to hell from the beginning. Now, after combining the forbidden technology from the Land of Dreams, no one knew to what extent it could be done, nor did they know what the hell those guys had awakened. Only in the continuation court, the dean stared silently at the screen in front of him. After a long time, "Prepare for the worst, Mr. Yeager." A cold electronic voice sounded from under the protective suit. "Just as I said to you before, no matter how well prepared we are, there are still unknown areas that we can't touch. We have put all the chips on the gambling table. Next, we can only pray that probability will be on our side." Accompanied by the low voice on the shattered land in the gambling house, the Rift Valley spread straight forward, and the hurricane spread. In the endless darkness, it surged like a tide, but it suddenly opened up from the middle. The crown wore a flaming ring of rebirth. A huge silhouette towering between heaven and earth walked out of the darkness. It looked like a human figure, but even a giant didn't have such a terrifying height and size. It clearly had 4 limbs, but its movements were clumsy and sluggish, as if it was shackled in the shackles called the body. It staggered forward. It staggered. The moment it stepped on the ground, countless mountain-like boulders rose into the sky like debris, defying gravity and surrounding the behemoth. In the ear-piercing alarm of the big secret instrument, the 4 fundamental forces welcomed the most thorough blow. The framework of gravity completely collapsed from within, and the out-of-control gravity spread throughout the entire fragment. Countless legions were crushed into dust under tens of thousands of times the gravity, and countless buildings were thrown into the sky and smashed into pieces by the sudden disappearance of gravity. The storm engulfed the entire domain like a breath, blowing away everything that was as small as a speck of dust. The outpost network was trembling violently, and 1/5 of the outposts were swallowed by the darkness. The stars in the big secret instrument also began to fall rapidly. The dominance of this world fell into the hands of the strange behemoth at an astonishing speed. Not only that, a bone-chilling chill emerged from Huaishi's heart. It was not a premonition of death. It was because the divine marks of Yin Zhongjuan and Great Si Ming were trembling instinctively. The divinity that he had tamed in the past was surging like boiling, out of control. It was almost out of his control and flew toward his opponent. More importantly, he found that his connection with the gambling house had been completely cut off. Not only him, at this moment, all the rules that enveloped the fragment were twisting and changing at a speed that made one's scalp tingle. The trump cards in the hands of the chess players were out of control, and began to collapse. The protection that shrouded all the chess pieces disappeared. An even more terrifying storm rose from the fragment, shrouding the world inside and completely sealing it from the outside, cutting off all connections to the present world. In the Survival Academy, countless cabins lit up with dazzling warning lights. The world inside the fragment was completely sealed, and the connection between the soul and the body was completely blocked. There was no way out. Just in front of the behemoth, Fusang withered, and countless roots withered rapidly. A huge crack exploded from the bottom of the Fusang tree. Green juice spurted out like blood and spilled, but it could no longer moisten the dry earth. All the fertile soil was rapidly turning into sand. There was no more vitality. It was as if everything had been completely devoured. Behind the behemoth, wings of light that shrouded the world slowly spread out, covering everything on the earth. A storm was coming at them. "Old lady, what the hell is that thing?" Kwafu hugged the branches of Fusang tightly, turned back and screamed, "Why does it look like an angel?" In the roar, the spreading shadow covered the earth. The Qing Emperor stared at the behemoth that was approaching step by step with no expression. Angel? It was too arrogant to use such a small existence to describe the opponent in front of them. Even the title of the gods could not describe such a huge body, right? What else could it be? She said, "Of course it's our enemy." How laughable. How pathetic. Under the burning almanac, Tralt quietly sighed softly. "I didn't expect that our first meeting would be on the battlefield." The giant of the world was collapsing rapidly, and the incarnation of the earth had lost connection with the earth at this moment. An old face was revealed from the peeling soil. Just like that, it supported its body with an iron staff with difficulty. The one who was crowned lowered its head and offered its respect and reverence to the opponent who was coming at it without reservation. "Our first meeting, the boundless earth that gives birth to all things, the mother of nature that protects all things. Until now, are you still unwilling to let go of your hatred?" No one responded. There was only a loud cry that resounded through the dead, silent world. It was mourning for the premature death of its child. At that moment, countless analysis programs finally found the only corresponding symbol of the origin substance in the Central Bureau's database. Analysis complete. Identification of integrity. Destruction element Old Gaia. Chapter 1168. It was as if an invisible hammer had smashed into his head. Huaisher felt his vision darken, and his ears buzzed. When he caught a glimpse of the enormous figure, he fell into a daze, shocked into a daze. The pressure from the divinity continuously acted on his will, causing him to almost collapse in an instant. But just before the source substance completely broke apart, the shadow of the silver mirror appeared behind his head. A thin layer of light resisted the suppression from the mother of all things, allowing him to temporarily regain consciousness and breathe. But his mind was still empty. The ground shook like a carpet, and the stars in the sky fell like ripe wild fruits. The howls that seeped into the soul came from the hurricane, echoing continuously. Was this the element of destruction? Even though he had been on the tip of countless knives, courted death many times, and had indirectly come into contact with the element of destruction many times. But when Gaia truly appeared in front of Huaisher, the terrifying height that was comparable to the stars and the terrifying power that controlled the world still made him tremble uncontrollably. It was not a derivative, nor was it a subordinate, nor was it an unimportant extension. It was the true element of destruction. It had nurtured and protected the world for countless years, the world itself. How should he describe it? The loving mother that nurtured it? The strict father that protected it? The distant ancestor? Or the combination of all meanings, the true so-called world? Rain, wind, mountain torrents, the earth, the sky, and everything gathered together to form a solemn appearance. All the power that relied on the present realm appeared in front of it, but it was nothing but bubbles and nothingness. It was because it had once been the present realm itself, the old Gaia that had been killed by its descendants. Now, When the remnant consciousness was awakened by the ring of rebirth and welcomed life from the dead fragment, the hatred and howls that stretched to the end of time once again filled the world. Amidst the rumbling of the earth, Gaia moved forward and reached out towards the domain in front of it. It wanted to take over everything again. Then it wanted to destroy everything. The sound of countless strings breaking rang out. Within the domain covered by the secret instrument, the starlight that extended to the ground was extinguished one after another, along with the framework of the secret instrument. It broke. In the dry and desolate yellow sand, Fusang's countless roots kept wailing. Under the will of Gaia, they were coldly stripped from the fragment system. Countless cracks extended and expanded on the towering trees. After the broken corona halo, the giant trunk broke apart one by one, no longer able to support its huge body. "Let's go, all of you," Emperor Qing ordered in a hoarse voice. "Don't delay, don't delay." All members of the Xia lineage should evacuate from Fusang and move to the holy coffin of a Russian Federation and the 6 paths of reincarnation in India. Don't waste any more time. What about you, old madam? Amidst the chaos, Lu Shu was in a daze. He looked at the old man on the throne, wanting to say something, but stopped. Emperor Qing didn't say anything. She just looked at him coldly. That cold and sharp gaze was like a knife, not allowing him to speak again. It wedged itself into his consciousness and pushed him away. In a trance, Lu Shu staggered down the ladder to the ground. He was at the end of the evacuation team, but when he turned around, he saw the giant tree collapsing behind him. Between the numerous cracks, the palace fell into the empty heart of the tree, sinking into the deepest part of the darkness. Everyone could escape, but only she couldn't escape. In that instant, Lu Shu finally realized what he had done. He staggered around and wanted to shout. He wanted to return to the collapsed palace to find that lonely old man. But he realized that he couldn't do anything. The shouts and shouts that he blurted out lost his strength, leaving only the sorrowful cries in his throat. He turned around and didn't dare to look anymore. He carried all the things that Emperor Qing gave him, turned around, roared, and ran away. In the heart of the tree, Emperor Qing looked at those people through the collapsed gate. He suddenly laughed. "They're all good kids. Go, go, don't look back." She smiled, coughed, and closed her eyes in the pain of being torn apart. She listened to the footsteps that shook the world, getting closer and closer. Under the cover of the ring of rebirth, Gaia moved forward step by step, swallowing all the vitality and destroying all the unrelated lives. Finally, it stretched out its hand towards the collapsing Fusang. Boom! The outline of the canopy formed by the withered branches completely collapsed. Then, it raised its foot and stepped on the ruins that had collapsed into rotten wood. The burning hurricane spread. The earth shook under Gaia's elegiac, sorrowful cry. Everything disappeared without a trace in an instant. However, in the broken palace, the Lotus Emperor looked up in shock. At the last moment, the remains of Fusang miraculously survived under Gaia's trampling. In the distant roar that seemed to be tearing his soul apart, threads that were so thin that they couldn't be seen had already wrapped around the remains of Fusang. Like a rope, they tied up the last heart of the tree. He pulled at it and pulled it out of the darkness. At all costs, on the dry land, there was a burning light surging. "Rise!" Kwafu roared. He carried the fishing rod that was bent to the limit and completely deformed in his hand and took another step forward. He dragged the core of Fusang and plowed a deep outline on the ground. "Are you stupid? Let go." Emperor Qing's eyes widened. He couldn't stand this fool anymore. He scolded angrily. "Can't you tell what's important now, Kwafu?" "I don't care." On the cracked ground, Kwafu, who was struggling to move forward, gradually expanded. Under the broken armor, scarlet sweat seeped out of his pores, burning like flames. Ignoring Emperor Qing's angry scolding, Kwafu gripped the fishing rod tightly. He pulled the palace behind him. Forward. On that face, veins bulged and burst, but they pieced together a broken smile. "What's important? I don't know. But as a real man, you have to King keep your word." He panted like a mule, dragging a millstone to the end of the world. Saliva dripped down in a sorry state. He took a step forward. His cracked calves stepped on the ground and nailed into the veins. "Don't worry, old lady." Finally, he turned around and grinned at the old man in the palace. "I will," Kwafu said. "I will protect you." Just like that. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, laughing, shouting, carrying, dragging, and rushing madly toward the gradually falling sun in the distance, filled with determination and hope. Running. He was running. Just like in ancient times, he was running toward the afterglow of the scorching sun. The ground collided with the soles of his feet, and the distant sound of drums burst out. The hoarse laughter merged with the burning hurricane. The wild soul galloped on the ground, heading into the distance. The darkness couldn't catch up with him because there were still stars and the light of the sun in the sky. But even if there was no light in the sky, it didn't matter. In the desolate world, he was still burning arrogantly. Gaia seemed to lower her eyes. Cold. No matter how fast he ran, looking down from the sky, it was just the last struggle of an ant before the torrent spread. He raised his foot again. The shadow of the mountain range fell from the sky, enveloping the fleeing figure and the heart of the tree once again. Trample. In the distance, a burning brilliance rushed over like a meteor, passing through endless shadows and waves, crossing a long distance. The steel machine god spewed out dazzling flames and crossed the narrow gap between heaven and earth. It soared into the sky from Gaia's trampling. It went around the soles of the feet, passed through the mountains, swept past Gaia's huge face, and circled around. On the back of the giant of the underworld, 6 missile launchers instantly opened up. Along the way, dazzling starlight once again sprinkled down from the darkness. Target locked. Long-range source annihilation weapon, full launch. Countless boxes enveloped Gaia's body. Then, the wandering stars spewed out flames and flew toward all the targets locked along the way. Dazzling flames rose. Little bits of light spread up Gaia's body. Wherever it passed, it was like a string of fiery red mushrooms suddenly growing on a rock. It illuminated the darkness in the gap, spreading destruction and high temperature. It caused the trampling action to stop abruptly. Amidst the endless ear-piercing screams, the hurricane rose again. Unlike the clumsiness of a huge body, when the alarm sounded, Gaia's huge hand suddenly appeared in front of the giant of the underworld without any warning. 7 fingers closed. Amidst the roar, the emergency mobile giant of the underworld changed its trajectory again and narrowly escaped from the gap between the closed fingers. But before it could breathe a sigh of relief, the bent index finger quickly dissolved and shot out from the fist towards Orton like a bullet. Flames burst out. Caught off guard, the giant of the underworld only had time to retract all the light wings, wrap them around its body layer by layer, and enter mummy mode. But the illusion was also pierced by Gaia's ordinary finger. Countless bandage-like light wings fell apart, and the giant of the underworld fell toward the ground. The outer armor is heavily damaged. The Lord of the Flies screamed. The Styx's reserves are almost running out. You better take it easy. Tisk, it's just a heavy injury. Orton grinned, looking at the giant running behind him. An inexplicable desire to compete emerged in his heart. There's actually someone who suits my taste in this world, Beelzebub. Work harder. We can't lose either. Why don't you King look at the road? While falling, the Lord of the Flies roared. We're about to hit it. Boom. Cracks appeared on the mountain, and countless dust flew up. The giant of the underworld rolled up from the foot of the mountain like a marble and got stuck on the mountain. Immediately after, Osiris, whose face was covered in dust, suddenly raised his head and stood up from the ground in an extremely strange manner. Again, Orton laughed loudly, ignoring the blood flowing from his forehead. His eyes surged with a fierce light. I'm already burning up. In the dark sky, the giant god of steel leaned against the stars behind him, laughed, and drew his sword again. At the same time, in the distant sky, the dim sun suddenly began to rotate. A low voice sounded in everyone's ears. Announcing to all, Trauthakatelli calmly announced, in 30 seconds, the solar almanac will officially enter a state of extinction. Everyone, please prepare for impact protection. Perhaps the American lineage will be burned up here today. But everyone, please seize the opportunity. He paused for a moment, and a happy smile appeared on his old face, as if he had escaped from a heavy burden. Finally, he said goodbye. The rest is up to you. Just like that, the blood-red sun rose again. It sank to the west. Chapter 1169. In the observation room of the Continuation Institute, Jaeger took off his glasses. His fingers trembled slightly as he took a deep breath. No matter what, he couldn't believe the scene in front of him. The great mystic doesn't even have any resistance, as expected. The dean's hands were still in the pockets of his protective suit, and his posture and actions hadn't changed from beginning to end. The great mystic itself is based on the present realm, imitating the functions and structure of Gaia. No matter how strict the structure is, no matter how much effort is put into it, it's still an imitation of Gaia and the gods. In front of the real thing, it doesn't have a higher authority. To Gaia, the great mystic isn't an opponent, but food. On his mask, inside the thick glasses, countless readings changed rapidly. Finally, the final data was obtained from the calculations. Recovery level, 9. 46%. Compared to Gaia at its peak, it was less than 1/10 of the wreckage. But no matter how much it was, in terms of nature, it had already allowed it to be immune to more than 90% of the attacks and countermeasures of the present realm. Back then, Jaeger took a deep breath and looked at the dean. In the files the pioneers showed me, is what happened back then true? The dean was silent for a long time before nodding. That's right, he said. An invisible barrier was erected around the two of them. The dean said calmly, back then, we did kill the old Gaia and used the element of destruction. To be precise, it was the fusion of the element of destruction to destroy the present realm. What was more convenient than the power of the element of destruction? But to protect this world, one actually had to rely on the power of destruction. This made one feel exceptionally mocking and laughable. The entire process was handled by the fourth-generation dean himself. In the projection of the 3 pillars, Gaia was forced to open the core. Then the samples of decomposition dream and cosmic light were used to fuse in the man-made miniature hell. The scar that existed in the subconscious of all living beings and the withering light that existed in the deepest part of the universe. The moment the two fused, it destroyed the 6 creators of the Utopia and the 11 departments of the Continuation Institute. Then, it completely killed Gaia's consciousness. But after so many years, the sorrowful cries of the old Gaia never stopped. The remaining grief turned into coral clouds and the sea in the sky, drifting endlessly in the sky of the present realm. This grudge would last forever. The analysis of the Ring of Rebirth is out. The dean suddenly said, the Bronze Eye's guess was right. That thing is essentially the god's wedge after it has been activated. By analyzing the structure of the gods, he created a blank body in reverse. After ignoring the state of the user, he forcibly activated the user. Back then, the Utopia's research was indeed about to be completed. All that was left was to break through the final barrier. Unfortunately, what stopped in the end was not a barrier. It's the rancher himself. As an item of redemption created for the White Crown King, the Ring of Rebirth was equivalent to a container and a smuff. It allowed the White Crown King to move freely in the form of an incarnation while his main body was frozen. It didn't matter whether or not it had the power. What mattered was that this consciousness could operate. Even just sitting there motionless was enough to raise morale tenfold for the American lineage. Ever since the White Crown King, the previous masters of the American lineage were only temporary. No one could reach the glorious heights of the past. If the White Crown King could be resurrected one day, even the feathered serpent who had been chased off the throne would probably wake up laughing in her dreams. Unfortunately, as long as the erosion and attraction of the rancher were not resolved, the White Crown King, who was the key target, could not wake up. Otherwise, it would only accelerate the speed of solidification. After the fall of the kingdom of heaven, the only survivors left in the world were those who were lucky enough not to have participated in the alliance of the gods. Even so, they were still dragged into the abyss in the first wave. Those who remained basically relied on various rites and protection and could not even use more divinity. Yes, did they only take away the ring of rebirth? Jaeger thought of a terrible possibility. The Utopia also had a backup of the entrance and key to the White Crown King's place of hibernation back then. We can't ignore this possibility, but there's no need to worry. The White Crown King won't be used by the Abyss, the Dean replied. His calm tone was like the law of narration. It was short and straightforward, making people feel at ease. If Golden Dawn wanted to use the Ring of Rebirth to resurrect the White Crown King, regardless of whether the White Crown King would cooperate or not, even if he did not pay attention, the first person he would kill after waking up would definitely be Golden Dawn. The White Crown King's illustrious reputation was not because of his powerful strength. 1/3 of it was because of his long-term vision and planning. 1/3 of it was because after leaving the Holy Spirit lineage, he was able to start anew and successfully establish a foundation in the new world under the high pressure of the gods. The last 1/3 was because of his backup plan. Countless backup plans. From the time the Holy Spirit lineage was at its peak, he was the first to see the danger not far away and buried the foreshadowing that allowed him to escape unscathed. And in the process of establishing the American lineage, he took out countless contracts and different witnesses, which limited the gods to the promises made on various occasions in the past and made them unable to use their full strength. Until the moment before he fell asleep, he was also preparing for the future. No one knew if such an existence, after being resurrected by the Ring of Rebirth, would have a backup plan that could avoid being devoured by the rancher. If the rancher's luck was bad and he escaped, Golden Dawn would probably start to have nightmares. Being targeted by an old fox that had been hiding for thousands of years was no different than sitting in the middle of a sniper's scope. After eliminating the possibility of the White Crown King freezing, Jaeger could not help but feel relieved. But his expression was still worried. He could not breathe. Even if he did not have to fight the White Crown King, the reality in front of him would not change. The destructive power of Gaia was still beyond everyone's imagination. Last time, he could use the destruction element to deal with it. But this time, what should he do? We can't use the same method to kill him again, right? Jaeger smiled bitterly. Why not? The Dean calmly asked back, which made Jaeger's bitter smile freeze on his face as he turned around in disbelief. We have already implanted the bones of the eternal beast and Boshuan spores into the bodies of the two ascendants on the chessboard. Their mission is to hold on until the end. If there is no way in the end, then we can only destroy the fragments, along with the people inside. By destroying this war, he would also destroy his spoils of war. Even if they returned without any results or suffered heavy losses, it did not matter. If they could not win alone, then they would lose both. This was the determination of the Continuation Academy. I finally know why the Continuation Academy is not an election system. Jaeger covered his face as he moaned hoarsely. You bunch of lunatics. The situation has not deteriorated to that extent, Mr. Jaeger. The Dean stared at the screen without wavering. The electronic voice was calm. Such a plan has been made before. In the chess game, there is still a possibility of defeating Gaia, even if the success rate is not more than 3%. Beside the screen, a green light suddenly turned blood red, flickered, and extinguished. Jaeger's expression froze. Another important strategic support died, but what made him even more incredulous was the symbol on the light. The Sword Saint is dead? He asked in shock. The Dean glanced at the symbol coldly and retracted his gaze. He told him, now it is 4%. Half a minute ago, under the shattered night sky, on the land that had turned into a desert, the fierce battle at the peak of the world had also ushered in its final conclusion. A soft sound. The sharp blade that was entrusted with the fierceness of the world finally stopped between the 5 exposed fingers of the white bones. Then the Heretic King raised his right fist and brazenly punched out toward Shanchuan's face. Shan Chuan only had time to raise his left hand. Then he could no longer feel his arm. Even half of his face lost consciousness. Everything that stood in the way of the iron fist was completely crushed into dust. Then even his right arm that held the sword was torn off. It left his body and flew into the distance. Unfortunately, Shan Chuan raised his remaining eyes and looked at the old man in front of him. There was also the gash on his throat that had almost severed his neck. Just a little more. Even so, he still understood in his heart. Even if his body was still intact, he would have no chance of winning. He had clearly returned to the prime of his life at the age of 54, his peak. But when he drew his sword and faced such an opponent, he still couldn't help but feel afraid. It was just like the first time he held a sword and faced a teacher. In front of that dignified man, he felt fear and death. When he closed his eyes, he would hallucinate that he was no longer facing a human, but a furious mountain peak. What the hell did this old thing figure out in the abyss? It was hard to understand. There was actually such a monster in this world. At this moment, the outcome had been decided. The existence that was truly above the peak stretched out his hand, grabbed Shan Chuan's neck, and lifted him up. His turbid eyes couldn't hide the admiration and regret that came from the bottom of his heart. In a long struggle, just now, he actually felt a rare tremor that he hadn't felt in a long time. It was really a hearty battle. On the Heretic King's throat, blood was still oozing out. It couldn't be healed. Not only here, but also his heart, arms, legs, and even his crotch. All the joints and fatal points were pierced and slashed by the sword, leaving unhealed marks. Even his soul that had just recovered was injured by the Supreme. He was different from Huai Shi, who was beaten until his face was swollen. He could feel that the person in front of him was a true genius, a person who was truly loved by battles and killing. And what Shan Chuan lacked was just a little bit of time. If given time, he might not be able to win this round, right? It was a pity. The Heretic King looked down and suddenly asked, such a good talent, why waste it in the cradle? Being obsessed with the hotbed of the present realm, he would never understand the real world. Only babies fought for the cradle. Only those who had truly walked into the abyss could understand what kind of power was waiting for them in front of them. There was an endless world, and they could pursue the truly precious things. Shan Chuan, the Heretic King suddenly asked, "Do you want to come to my side?" In his last gasp, Shan Chuan didn't answer. He just stared at him. It was as if he was thinking about some incomprehensible question. Soon, he couldn't help but laugh while coughing. Even blood and saliva flowed down from the corner of his mouth. What a shame, Shan Chuan muttered to himself. After waiting for so many years, I'm actually not a match for that bastard Luo Siwei. Compared to the guy who punched his teacher into the abyss back then. Instead, he was the one who lost here. After knowing the news of his death, that guy would definitely laugh at him without holding back, right? After living a clean life, he actually had to bear such a defeat. He closed his eyes. To bang. Blood splattered. Under the destruction of the iron fist, Shan Chuan's soul, together with his broken body, turned into ashes. When his last mercy was rejected, the Heretic King no longer hesitated. He offered his last respect to this powerful enemy. A final blow without holding back. Bones and ashes. Not a single trace of ashes was left. Even the cards on the chessboard fell apart. Far away in the frozen cabin of the Continuation Academy, the silent old man was instantly shattered into pieces. The destruction spread, along with his soul. In the deathly silent world, only the sound of thunder and wind echoed in the distance. He didn't lament the death of this powerful enemy. He didn't even feel complacent because of this hard-won victory. The Heretic King turned around indifferently and walked into the distance. Where was his next opponent? In the distance, the scorching sun was burning, dyeing the world red. The blood-colored flames crashed down toward Gaia. Chapter 1170. In that instant, there was only one color left in the entire world. The sky turned into a sea of blood, and the earth was dyed red. Cruel and cold light radiated from the illusory sun wheel, enveloping all directions. Just after the announcement on behalf of the American genealogy ended, the old man holding the iron staff turned around for the last time and looked at the world shrouded in storms and turmoil. He turned around and walked up the steps. His broad and thin body was like a skeleton covered with a layer of old skin. Once he gripped the iron staff in his hand, blue veins would pop out from his withered muscles. Under the restraint of the bone beads and agate hair ornaments, mottled white hair flew up from Trar's shoulders and fluttered in the wind. Just like that, he walked up the solid steps step by step and walked to the top of the Great Pyramid. He walked up to the altar that was waiting for him. There, the sacrificial ceremony with oil paint and blood waited quietly. In the solemn and dead silence, only the sound of drums echoed. It was as if the heart that had died for many years was once again active, awakening under the call of the sacrificial ceremony. A thirsty and cruel feeling rose from the darkness, turning into waves of surging smoke and changing violent winds. It enveloped everything, waiting for the sacrificial ceremony. So serious. Trar smiled slightly. He raised the iron staff in his hand, paused, and wedged it into the golden stone. The black robe on his body was also taken off and hung on the iron staff. It was like a tombstone left behind. Relax, Liz. The naked old man lay on the altar and smiled at his junior. Smile more. Only this face can match your beauty. Liz was silent and did not say a word. Human emotions seemed to have disappeared from that pair of eyes, leaving only iron-like coldness and cruelty. Only the hand holding the stone knife trembled slightly. It was almost imperceptible. What's wrong? The old man grinned as if he was mocking her. He had expected it. Are you afraid? After all, you're a girl. It's hard to be heavy. Pa. Darkness struck. She could not see anything. Only a low voice sounded in her ears, praising the great power of the gods. Dig out your eyes and offer them to the mirror of 10,000 changes. The voice should have been solemn and cold, but at this moment it could not hide the hoarseness and the slight tremor in his words. At the top of the pyramid, the blood-red sun suddenly enlarged. It was as if it was rapidly approaching the ground, enveloping the entire sky and enveloping everything within. Wisps of blood flowed out from Trar's eyes, going against gravity and rising into the sky. They converged in the endless scarlet red. It caused the lonely divine mark to gradually become lively. Intense burning pain surged from his soul, as if a part of himself was being torn apart forever. He could feel the pain and trembling of being gradually devoured. But Trar couldn't help but smile, and his blood-stained face gradually became happy. Good, Liz, that's it, very good. You're the priest of the first son, an agent chosen by the gods. You don't have to worry about those lowly benevolence and weakness. You're the only one who cannot hesitate. Now do what you have to do. The obsidian sword slashed down again, cutting off the old man's long hair. Cut off your hair and offer it to the wind of impermanence. Just like that, the long white hair flew into the sky as Liz's 5 fingers loosened. It burned up in the blood sun, causing the blurry outline in the sun to become clearer. It was as if it had faintly reached out to the ground and the sacrifice below, waiting for the real beginning. The stone sword was raised again and stabbed down, aiming at Trar's chest, cutting open the flesh and cutting off the bones. Finally, the beating heart was held out from the spreading blood and raised to the sky. The falling blood mixed with tears that were not worth mentioning fell into the dust under the altar. The dazzling bloodlight was already close at hand. It was so tyrannical. In the sun, the blurry figure seemed to have descended in front of him, waiting for the priest's devout sacrifice, until Liz half knelt on the ground and raised the sacrifice in her hands. Gouge out your heart and offer it to the enemy of 10,000 worlds. At that moment, the blurry figure seemed to reach out and take the insignificant gift from the priest's hands. Together with the heart, it disappeared without a trace. Bang! The sun in the sky suddenly contracted, like a heartbeat, bursting out with a low sound that shook the world. And on the altar, Trar's broken body had already cut off its last breath. Only the corner of his mouth still had a smile, waiting for the final sacrifice. Liz was silent and looked at him. After a long time, she bent down and gently kissed his forehead. "Goodbye, Mr. Trar." She stroked the old man's face and said goodbye. Beside his ear, she whispered softly, "Offer your soul and praise the first son." No one responded. Only the old man on the altar quietly turned into ashes. In the wind, there seemed to be a familiar laughter. It gradually went further and further away. But in the end, he patted her shoulder and left her with a final gentleness. Farewell, little Liz. Above the sky, the sun's kaleidoscope burst out with a roar. It was like the sound of a bell. The expanding sun suddenly contracted like a crown and a throne, hanging high at the peak of this world, spinning wildly. And in the middle of the empty sun, a skeleton that seemed to be carved out of obsidian slowly appeared. A blazing light shot out from its eyes, tens of thousands of times brighter than the sun. When the ancient chaos era, the fourth era of America, ended, everything in the world was destroyed, leaving only the void. And the first sun killed the giant beast known as the world's giant, Chartekuteli, and split its corpse. Half of it became the earth, and the other half cast the sky, opening a brand new fifth era of the sun. To the American lineage, Chartekuteli represented the world itself. As the inner leader of the American lineage, Char naturally carried the burden of protecting the entire lineage. At the same time, he was also the strongest combat power of the American lineage on the chessboard. Unfortunately, this power to control everything would not be useful to Gaia. How could the miracle achieved by the human body be compared to the real world? If he overestimated himself, he would only become food for Gaia and be completely dissolved in the authority of Mother Earth. The moment he realized this result, Char had already made a decision. Now, his existence was no longer beneficial to the battle situation. Instead, it would become a loophole in the present realm, the weakness of the American lineage. Since that was the case, he could only give up this meaningless power. As the miracle of the fifth era of the sun was completely reversed, the American lineage returned the world represented by Trar to the authority left behind by the gods. When the solar calendar stone swallowed the divinity of the world's giant, what was born was the power that destroyed everything. At this moment, the solar calendar stone hung high in the sky. The grand bell spread, announcing to all things. The world's giant was burning at this moment. The first sun had descended. Just by operating it, tens of thousands of miles of land turned into yellow sand, burned into scarlet red, and then melted into crystals. Endless earth fire spewed out, and a destructive rain of fire sprinkled down from the sky. It was as if the real sun had fallen into the present realm. It coldly burned everything. Even if it was his own country below, he didn't care. Now, the solar calendar stone had turned into a real divine palanquin, carrying the destruction bestowed by the first sun as it wandered in the sky. And the one who controlled this destruction was Trar's soul. When the blood sun fell, the entire world was only left with the silence before the arrival of destruction. Gaia's sorrowful cry paused for a moment. Under the cover of the ring of rebirth, the blurry face formed by countless earthstones looked up at the falling solar wheel, opened its mouth, and roared. Boundless darkness appeared out of nowhere and formed a barrier. Without Great Si Ming's divinity, with just a simple thought, there were thousands of barriers that were far above the returning ruins that were formed. Then, the barriers that could not be compared to thousands of ultimate were burned to ashes under the impact of the solar wheel. Gaia's authority would not be useful to him. This was a power that was born to destroy the world. This was the first sun that had cleansed and destroyed the entire American territory several times. The endless darkness was torn apart by the bloodlight. The solar almanac fell towards Gaia, and within the huge solar disk, the silent pitch-black skeleton seemed to suddenly open its eyes and laugh sinisterly. Just like that, from the solar wheel, skinny arms stretched out and grabbed at the world in front of him. Embrace, with the light and heat created by the endless fusion in the solar core. It was like a wanderer who had finally returned to his home and the embrace of his mother. But what it brought to him was not gifts and love, but rebellion and death. At that moment, the intense light swallowed everything. The spreading airwaves lifted the earth, ravaging the mountains and cover. In the roar that shook the world, a huge mushroom cloud rose slowly. And at the core of the destruction, in the endless light and heat, the sun and the world embraced each other fervently, burning and melting everything quickly. Gaia's huge body was rapidly dissipating and collapsing, but more earth and stones were rising continuously. The power that was enough to burn everything could not kill him. That instinct, which had no consciousness at all, resisted dying once again. Ha! On the huge ring of rebirth, a crack slowly appeared. From it, a sparkling light fell. It was like blood, the blood of Gaia. Blood kept flowing and fell on the broken body, causing Gaia's huge body to be rapidly reborn. When the color of the soil was burned away, what appeared was the light of iron and obsidian. And in front of his chest, lava flowed out from the hole that was pierced through. In his arms, the blood-colored solar wheel rotated, spreading high heat, constantly destroying his body, enveloping the huge monster that stood between heaven and earth in flames. But even so, Gaia's arms did not relax in the slightest. Just like that, without any grudges, he responded to the hug from his son with a hug. After swallowing rebellion and death, he sang a sad song. No matter how the solar almanac erupted with a stronger light than before again and again, in the spreading hurricane, the terrifying heat soared into the sky again and again. Everything within 10,000 miles was completely burned to ashes. The earth shook again and again, but the melted colossus still maintained its original state. It was just a sorrowful cry and a sympathetic hug. It calmly received the anger from its son. On the ring of rebirth that gradually appeared with cracks, strands of Gaia's blood kept sprinkling down. It was like the light of tears. The elegy echoed. Chapter 1171. In front of the Russian Federation's Holy Coffin defense line, the battle was still going on in the hurricane. The battle between the present realm and hell didn't stop for a moment. Instead, as the secret ritual gradually collapsed, it became more and more tragic. The fortress had already been dyed scarlet, and countless large groups of corpses and knights were piled up into mountains. And just between the sea of blood and the mountain of corpses, the black-clothed archbishop silently walked between the corpses, smoothing out every pair of eyes that were filled with unwillingness. In the distance, there were more black shadows and legions emerging from the domain of hell. Even the power of the solar almanac isn't enough. When the roar and the wind sounded again, the holy knight raised his head in shock, ignoring the dazzling light that stung his eyes. He couldn't believe it. It's not that the power of the solar almanac isn't enough, but that Char can't support the power of the first sun for a long time. The archbishop calmly replied, "A war weapon like the solar almanac wasn't something that could be used for a long time just by burning a world giant. Just every time it was activated, it would consume tens of thousands of souls. Every minute and every second was a huge test of the supply of source substances. Now, the connection with the present realm was cut off, and there wasn't so much supply from the subordinate hell. In order to prevent other juniors from replacing him, Char chose to use himself to fill this gap. But a world giant wasn't enough to contend against Gaia. Was the power exchanged for as a sacrifice enough to destroy it? Char was probably well aware of the results of his sacrifice. But as an elder, was he going to watch the juniors replace him and go through fire and water while he was still alive? Wasn't that too shameful? This was the only path he could take. And only this time, he had to win, even if he had to burn himself to death. After all, this isn't a matter of the American genealogy, and it's not a question that Char can solve alone. The archbishop took off the rosary on his wrist and handed it to the knight in front of him. The preheating of the holy coffin has been completed. After the Holy Spirit's authority descends, I'll leave this place to you. The knight froze in place and opened his mouth to speak. But the archbishop didn't say anything in the end. He just looked at him one last time. He turned around and left. Soon, in the reverberating hymn, the stooped body gradually turned into ashes and dissipated. However, the surging light gathered on his body and turned into burning wings. After leaving the body of a mortal, the soul of a living saint reappeared. In the Holy Bible, the barrier between the kingdom of heaven and the realm of reality was summoned, and the power to defend the realm of gods once again descended. God's justice, angel throne. But what was even faster than the Russian Federation was the blazing light that descended from the sky. It was lightning that was enough to stab and burn all eyes. It was intense and cruel, dazzling and cold. It stretched for thousands of miles, descending from the sky from a great distance. It was not a pure celestial phenomenon, nor was it Yun Zhongjuan's light of disaster. Instead, it was a kind of power that was more profound in nature and closer to destruction. Now, the lightning was like a spear, piercing down from the clouds and piercing through Gaia's body. Then, the second, the third, and the fourth. The materialized destruction continued to pierce down. In an instant, the realm that was melted by the sun was erected like a forest of sharp edges. In the core hinterland of the realm of reality, the huge veins that were once enveloped by the great arcana reappeared, and infinite divinity rose from the Pantheon temple. A vague projection emerged from it, forcibly propping up the great arcana that was on the verge of collapse. It turned into a pillar, making up for the incomplete parts of Asia and America, and stabilizing the final framework. It maintained the final integrity of the realm. Then, in Mars's hand, the javelins flew out again. They looked into the distance. When the javelins fell from the sky again, they formed a thunderbolt. They carried the anger and might of the god ancestor. Jupiter, Zeus, Odin. Not only that, but each of the javelins even contained a divine mark that came from the hands of the gods. In this way, the power of the gods was treated as a one-time consumable, squandering it without any hesitation. And in the Pantheon temple, infinite divinity continued to grow. Under the guidance of the great arcana, it fused and continuously provided Mars with this destructive power. This was the true power of the Pantheon temple. After collecting the blood and marks of countless gods, it was like an all-encompassing and terrifying foundation that was like a gene bank. As long as there was enough time, no matter what kind of god's power or what kind of divine mark, it could be created and derived from the most basic divinity. The prize for that was the cracks on the palace. Viscous blood dripped from Mars's hand. On his right hand that was holding destruction tightly, his bones were already exposed. The white bones were also burned by the thunderbolt, and there were cracks. But seizing this fleeting opportunity, the throned angel broke through the air and arrived. In the brilliant flames, it revealed an appearance that was like a wheel. It spread its wings and enveloped the almanac that was about to burn out, dragging the blood sun away from Gaia's restraint. But when the high heat of destruction stopped, Mother Earth, who was pierced by countless thunderbolts, once again played a sad song that shook the entire world. She raised her head. She ignored her torn body and the destruction that fell from the sky. The incarnation of the world, destruction element old Gaia, stood up from the forest of javelins and moved forward again, step by step, towards the children that had left her a sorrowful call. In front of the Pantheon temple, Mars was stunned for a moment. He lowered his head and spat out a mouthful of boiling blood. He turned his hand again, pulled out the thunder spear, and threw it. The flames of destruction rose again. This time, the intense light fell from the sky and pierced through Gaia's face again. Gaia's footsteps came to an abrupt halt. It was not because of the thunderbolt from the god ancestor, but because behind him, beside the hissing monkey, the old woman raised her face. Her face gradually turned from sun-tanned to indigo, and her wrinkles faded. The figure of a ferocious and hungry tiger walked out of the void and knelt in front of her. Behind her, arms spread out like lotus flowers. Blood-red tongues protruded from their mouths. After the disguise of the flower garlands hanging on their necks dispersed, The heads of Rakshasas that were strung on necklaces were revealed, stepping on the cracked ground, holding a spear, a treasure sword, a treasure bottle, a venomous snake, an iron hammer, and the copper rod that Hanuman had transformed into. Now, Mother Earth opened her mouth and roared at the element of destruction, shaking the earth and the sky. God's Mart Bashi's rope was suddenly thrown out. Chains extended out of thin air and wrapped around Gaia's body, causing his progress to come to an abrupt halt. Just like that, he pulled the rope tightly and wrestled with the world. He was not allowed to take another step forward. However, just behind Mother Earth, the tides of hell surged continuously. They had already poured into the realm through the cracks of the great secret instrument. The torrent raged. When Fusang, which had once borne more than 60% of the pressure on behalf of the other lineages, collapsed, they began to drive straight in and wreak havoc everywhere. When the barrier of the realm was on the verge of collapse, the power of the rulers erupted with a loud bang. They pushed everything to the edge of the cliff. And just above the collapsing border, in the endless torrent, only the last lonely reef was left. That was the dim light from Lord Yin Zhongjuan. Ing Fangzhou. Right under his feet, the rotten giant butterfly wailed. Together with the other monsters, it was completely pierced by the lightning and no longer made a sound. But there was more monsters, more enemies. The tide from hell surged from the end of the earth. It seemed to be endless. In the suddenly surging soil, the snake monster that had been lurking for a long time flew out with a hiss. But then it was nailed to death by the lightning and turned into charcoal. However, there were more large groups that bypassed his location, crossed the boundary he had set, and rushed behind him. The horn of the fallen country sounded again. At the end of the earth, the array of death advanced. Arrows fell from the sky like a rainstorm. What responded to them was lightning that was even more violent than the arrows. Once again, 10 levels of purification. Lightning surged, and the wind disaster reappeared. A majestic tornado rose from the ground, bringing with it a poisonous rain. It swept everything destroyed by the lightning into the sky. But this time, it was no longer as fierce as before. Instead, it was like the last tired gasp of a giant beast. It screamed at the top of its lungs. "Ha!" Lord Yin Zhongjuan, who had been standing alone for a long time, suddenly trembled. In the distant wind, a golden arrow pierced through his chest, causing him to stagger back a step. Sticky blood flowed out from his chest, and the curse spread. Then, among the tens of thousands of soldiers of the fallen country, the leader raised his longbow again and pulled the bowstring. The arrow tore through the storm and defeated the lightning. It sank into Lord Yun's thigh again, making it difficult for him to stand still. The resentful water pierced into the soil and forcibly propped up his body. The familiar dizziness and vertigo appeared in his consciousness, dragging him deeper into the darkness. He knelt on the ground in a sorry state. He gasped for breath. He no longer had the strength to pull out the arrow. Tisk. Behind him, someone who could no longer bear to see him make a fool of himself let out an irritated voice. When Ing Fangzhou slowly turned his head, he saw the outline behind him that looked like a stone sculpture. It was as if it had not changed for 10,000 years. The petrified creator looked down, not hiding his disgust and displeasure. "Sharma?" Ing Fangzhou raised his eyes slightly and glanced at him. Soon, he withdrew his gaze without interest. "When did you come?" "From the beginning, of course." Sharma answered indifferently, saying things that no one would believe. Even though his former companions were in such a tragic state, he did not have any pity or sympathy. Instead, he seemed to be gloating. "What are you doing here?" Ing Fangzhou shook his head tiredly, panted, and got up with the help of the resentful water. "Forget it, it's up to you. Don't get in the way." Behind him, the creator was silent and did not answer. After a long time, he suddenly said, "I'm here to see you." Lord Yun's shoulders trembled for a moment. He turned his back to him, but he did not speak again. It was as if he did not hear him. "Russell said that the last time you died, you were very impassioned." Sharma told him, "I want to know if you are like what he said." Lord Yun's back stiffened. After a long time, he could not help but laugh out loud. Ah, it's fake. Ing Fangzhou turned his head slightly and glanced at him like a fool who had been deceived several times. He asked with pity, "How could you believe such a ridiculous lie?" Sharma was stunned and looked at him blankly. But he saw the smile on his face. He was so proud. "Don't look down on me, Sharma." Ing Fangzhou raised his head and asked proudly, "Do you think I will die in front of you?" Sharma did not say anything. He just looked at him. He could not help but sigh. Why was there such an annoying person in this world? Even at such a time, he was still stubborn. He was about to die for the third time, but he still looked like he was the winner. It was really hard to like him from the bottom of his heart. When he thought about how he had jumped into this gamble for such a guy, he could not help but wonder if there was something wrong with his brain. But he was already here. It was too late to regret. Before that, he could not help but laugh out loud. Right in front of the thousands of soldiers and countless monsters that were advancing like a forest, Lord Yun held the resentful water in his hand and stretched out his hand to his long-lost companion. "Do you want to come?" Ing Fangzhou asked. "This is the last time." Sharma looked at his palm and asked contemptuously, "You? Can you still keep up now?" "Stupid words." Ing Fangzhou sneered. "Aren't you the one who has been dragging us down? That's a dream." Sharma held his hand and warned him for the last time. "If you can't keep up this time, stay where you are and wipe your tears." The sound of rocks breaking rang out. Under the falling debris, a pale face that had not seen the sun for a long time and a pair of eyes that were illuminated by the fierce light were revealed. From between the two people's tightly clenched palms, thunder rose again. "Then let's do it again." Those familiar tricks, the gloomy sky, and the fissured earth began to tremble violently. The framework from the Creator was unfurled. It included the flow of the vitality of all things, the changes of all astronomical phenomena and disasters, and turned this world into a box. It traced upward and backward without limit, all the way to the origin and end of all things. In the limitless enclosed framework, the birth and death of life, the migration of mountains, and the operation of the ocean. Framework, Genesis. Just like that, the world in front of him was once again forcefully taken back from the hands of hell and placed under his own control. He sealed it off layer by layer, isolating it from all pollution and erosion. In the end, he handed over this power that was born within the all creations to Yun Zhongjuan without reservation. One for the masses, and the other for the Axis. It was as if this was the cycle of this world, and this was the flawless truth of ancient times. Thus, endless dark clouds gathered again. The Kunpeng roared and scattered endless lightning. The frozen rainstorm shrouded the mortal world, and the earth cracked as it rumbled. The sound of thunder echoed above the sky, like a cold laughter toward hell. Thus, it could not wait to call out. Once again, it issued a challenge. In Lord Yun's hand, the light of hatred extended to 100,000 feet, illuminating everything in the darkness once again. In this way, the boundary between the present realm and hell was once again drawn. Come on, my enemy. Come on, my death. Chapter 1172. When the gray storm blew from the sky, endless ashes fell like rain. Specks of emerald-green flames were attached to the ashes, reverberating between heaven and earth like fireflies, causing everything to be dyed in a layer of grayish-black. In the cold and dead world, blurry shadows appeared among the ashes. As if they were shackled, they staggered forward, hungrily searching for any living thing, tearing it apart and devouring it. A snowstorm blew over without warning, and the dancing snowflakes outlined distorted faces in the air. The lush trees quickly withered and rotted, and scarlet blood flowed out from under the cracked bark. In the heart of the rotting trees, there was the piercing cry of a baby. The remaining pools of water quickly rotted, and the surface of the water reflected the corpses that did not exist here. Suddenly, a deformed giant foot stepped down from the clouds, flattening the desolate forest and the smelly water, and then another after the shattered dark clouds, the hideous outline of a mountain appeared. Countless tentacles fell from above, randomly searching for the breath of all living things. There were more. One after another, wriggling monsters walked out of the ghostly world. Under the gaze of the jesters, they spread out to the entire world. Despair and destruction. This was the generous gift of the flute player. Has the Snake Mountain defense line behind Fuso also been dealt with? Gala stood on the head of the Skeleton King and looked down. You guys are actually still useful. It's nothing more than some unpresentable schemes. How can it compare to the general trend of a destroyed country and the Sea of Thunder? The jesters revealed their pale faces from the darkness of their robes, and their double pupils looked down at the turbulent world below. If Gaia did not exist, the creation of the Shadow Realm would not have been so easy. Right below their feet, the turbid sea split. The abyssal tide flowed through the cracks of the reality realm and surged towards the gradually dimming light. After extracting the 9 springs created by the Eye of Darkness, combined with the miracle of paradise, and with the help of the jesters, the dead Gaia was revived by the Ring of Rebirth. At this moment, in the projection of Water Mirror, everything was rapidly falling apart. The Pantheon has been restrained by Gaia and is no longer a threat. After Fuso's collapse, the only thing at the forefront is the empty frame propped up by the living dead of the Russian Federation. The jester smiled and said, although the destruction farming is not easy, once the chain starts, it's not something that can be stopped by mere human strength. Now, on the march route of the Fallen Kingdom, there is no longer any opponent. If I must say, Yin Zhongjuan and the Creator are like mantises trying to stop a chariot. But they're the prey that you specifically asked for, so it's inconvenient for us to deal with them. Oh. It's like deboned meat and boneless fish. Gala looked at the surging lightning in the distance, as well as the endless tide of hell, and mocked the miserable appearance of his old enemy. He sneered. Now, don't you just need to slaughter them? He paused, turned around, and asked curiously, should I thank you? The jester bowed his head and was about to speak modestly when he heard a loud explosion. Huh! Before he could react, his head had already been blown apart by Gala's punch. Immediately after, a sickle-like golden curved sword had already pierced his chest, nailing him to the skeleton. His pale face did not have time to regenerate before it was completely turned into dust under the trampling of the solidified one. Are you crazy, Gala? The jester's soul did not disperse. He reassembled in the wind and shouted angrily, What are you doing? I'm beating you bunch of sons of asterisk cheese. Gala stretched out his hand and pinched the invisible ghost. He pulled his neck and approached him. He did not hide his anger and said to him word by word, What are you going to do? Shouldn't I be the one asking this question? What are you bunch of sons of asterisk cheese doing? You guys broke into my game, just like those dogs in the present world who spoiled other people's moods. You guys use your own cheating devices to show off, wagging your tails in front of me. Look at how powerful I am. Look at how smart we are. Peeing in the wine, drooling in the dishes, and being smug and ugly. Enough of that. I should have crushed all of you asterisk T-sters to death from the very beginning. In his mouth, which was decorated with all kinds of gold and gemstones, the deadly poison was dense. It burned like a flame and instantly engulfed the screaming jester. If we're going to fight, then fight properly. What's the point of playing with such a messy game? Just like that, the jester in his hand was ground to dust. Not even his soul was left. Gala threw away the sickle expressionlessly, turned around, and walked towards the open door behind him. In the surging river of blood, the snake-like ruler raised his huge head. Lamia asked angrily, Gala, what are you doing? I'm not doing anything. I'm leaving. Gala glanced at her coldly and did not bother to pay attention to her. If you like, you can accompany this bunch of useless people to eat themselves. I'm not playing anymore. Or, he paused for a moment and suddenly revealed a strange smile. You want to stop me? The ruler, who had turned into a blood snake, stared at Gala with cold eyes, but did not say anything in the end. This was a power that belonged to him alone. It was a reward from the withered king to his capable favorite. It was a special privilege from the king of the fallen kingdom. As long as it was in the abyss, Gala could participate in all wars as he wished. Every death banquet could not refuse the arrival of this distinguished guest. At the same time, it could not stop him from turning around and leaving after losing interest. He could come and go freely. In front of the open door, Gala's footsteps paused slightly. He took one last look at the dazzling thunder in the distance. As if he was mocking himself, he smiled indifferently. The door closed. Gala had disappeared. Lamia retracted her gaze and suppressed the anger caused by the psychopath. The giant snake hissed silently. The sea of blood surged and rolled towards the realm. At the same time, in the distance, the behemoth that was shackled between the forest of spears took another step forward. As a result, the divine mark, ropes of Bashi that had once bound countless Rakshasas and heretics, and subdued evil spirits and solidified beings, completely collapsed. When the gigantic creature with the halo of rebirth on its crown raised its head, it seemed to take a deep breath. Following which, amidst the sorrowful cries and elegy, a storm burst forth. The grayish-black spiral pillar rose from the ground beneath Gaia's feet and rushed into the sky, spreading out in all directions. Wherever it passed, all the lightning was uprooted, and everything within sight was completely flattened by the power of the storm. Only Nanjin's mother still stood on the spot. Her indigo skin continued to emit sparks in the storm. She threw down the broken rope in her hand. Riding on Hungry Tiger, she galloped through the storm. After sweeping past Gaia, she once again blocked in front of her. The wheel of God descended from the sky while burning, opening a straight path for her. Hungry Tiger stepped on the hurricane and rushed into the sky. In the air, the furious phantom of the goddess of vengeance flashed. The copper hammer in her hand smashed down. In the low sound of the stone drum, Gaia's iron body shook for a moment, following which cracks appeared. At the same time, the copper hammer in Nanjin's hand also cracked. A strike that was enough to turn mountains into dust actually only made the behemoth pause for a moment, following which she had already stepped forward once more. The giant hand grew, and without any warning, it smashed down on Nanjin's mother. Tens of thousands of kilograms of weight gathered on the fingertip of the mountain and stabbed down. Compared to Gaia, all mortals were like dust on the fingertip. However, dust was extremely difficult to crush. Amidst the howls of the hungry tiger, Difficult Mother held the sword and the machete in her hands with all her might. Her indigo skin was already covered in cracks, and from the corners of her eyes, sticky blood dripped down like tears. The old woman raised her arms and roared. It was hard to imagine that this was the graceful old woman that Huaishur had seen before. Her hoarse voice was even louder than the clanging of countless steel, and the rumbling sound waves spread out. The hand of mountains that was crushing down was actually lifted up by an inch. The flame of the furnace ignited everything again, and the sword of Tian-Ke reappeared. Slash! The brilliance on the ring of rebirth surged. In the void directly in front of the sword, countless sparks burst out, and the sound of steel screamed. It was as if it was slowly advancing through an invisible wall. It was difficult to reach the real target, but even if it could only attract a part of the attention, it was enough. In the bridge, while Huaishur was still maintaining the sword of Tian-Ke with all his strength, Nautilus sped backward. A bright moon suddenly appeared in the sky behind the dark cloud. The miracle imprint from Artemis was displayed here. The moonlight was like frost. The clear and bright moonlight turned into a giant pillar, enveloping Gaia and completely freezing everything inside. But in the blink of an eye, under Gaia's struggle, countless cracks appeared on the frozen moonlight. The brief moment of respite was fleeting. On the ground, Nangongmu took a deep breath and suddenly opened her mouth. The fire seed that had been dormant in her lungs suddenly leaped out from her mouth, forming an endless torrent. The power from the natural enemy, Green Neck, exploded. The flame poured into the cracks. The moment it touched the material, it rapidly expanded without reason. In the blink of an eye, it enveloped the entire Gaia, burning inwards. In India's origin scripture records, when Vishnu and Brahma decided to fight it out, just as they were about to destroy everything, Shiva turned into a pillar of fire between the two of them and stopped them from fighting. If Shiva was the incarnation of destruction, then the flame was the manifestation of the destruction caused by Vishnu and Brahma. The evil consequences caused by the collapse of the great mystic ritual, the consequences caused by the invasion of the Abyss Army, and all the karma that could happen in the future reappeared in the form of the flame attacking Gaia. Not only that, the flame in the solar almanac reappeared. In the dim sun, the skeleton raised its finger again and pointed at Gaia. The soul of the world giant threw out the light of destruction again. The wheel formed by the throne angel rotated and appeared on top of Gaia's head. This time, the throne angel didn't carry the will of the gods. Instead, it pulled Gaia's huge body and forcefully pulled it off the ground, cutting off its connection with the earth. The mournful cry sounded again. In the siege, Gaia didn't care about the siege that could injure it. Instead, it turned its face and looked at Nautilus. The burning palm suddenly raised, and from thousands of miles away, it reached out as if it touched something invisible. Clench. Oh no. Mother Nine-Eye's expression changed. Just like how the world giant couldn't resist the attraction of Gaia, whether it was Great Sea Ming or Yun Zhongjuan. The road of heaven's inquisition that was created by referring to the operation of the world was the same for Gaia. When a miracle of the same origin appeared in front of it, no matter how far away it was, it couldn't stop this instinctive attraction and call. Mother Nine-Eye threw out the sword in her hand and blocked the crack, wanting to cut off its perception of Huaishur, but it was too late. It was as if a bad kid who had wandered the streets after school was blocked at the entrance of the game hall. The strict mother reached out her hand to the rebellious son. It was time to go home. Come here. At that moment, on the bridge, under the layers of barriers, Huaishur felt like he had fallen into an ice cave. He couldn't help but sneeze. In the wheel of the throne angel, the Holy Spirit of the Archbishop looked up in shock. Mar's eyes widened, and Mother Nine-Eye frowned. Even Trar, who was burning in the sun wheel, couldn't help but turn around. Huaishur was also stunned. He couldn't help but touch his body. Everything was perfect. It was hard to understand. It was as if, perhaps, nothing had happened. Even the divinities of Great Sea Ming and Yun Zhongjuan, who were originally terrified, calmed down. It was as if they found out that the person blocking the door of the game hall was actually someone else's mother. He wiped off his cold sweat and heaved a sigh of relief. Then, he returned to the front of the arcade machine and continued to insert coins. In the stone marrow shop of the present realm, a certain black-hearted woman who didn't want to reveal her name was lying on the sofa. She was hitting a pillow and was already convulsing with laughter. You used Mother Earth's sword to kill Tai's officials? Did you ask for my permission? Chapter 1173. A chill ran down his spine, but it quickly faded away. By the time Huaishur's mind was filled with shock and fear, everything was over. The entire world seemed to have fallen into an indescribable silence for a brief moment. Only Huaishur scratched his head awkwardly and began to think. He hesitated. Should he say out of courtesy to show respect? Also, he seemed to be unaffected by Gaia's suppression and erosion. Great Sea Ming, who protected the living, and Yun Zhongjuan, who controlled the weather and earthquakes, were essentially an extension of Gaia. But now, he was independent of Gaia's influence? Was this appropriate? But when countless doubts appeared in his mind, he seemed to find an extremely familiar smile in front of him. It made him feel a sense of helplessness from the bottom of his heart. As an ascendant of the Heaven's Inquisition Road, he had escaped the suppression of Gaia, but the price was to be paid by another black-hearted woman? It was hard to tell whether this was a joy or a sorrow. But no matter what, now was not the time to think slowly. The moment he reacted, Huaishur's will operated on Nautilus and gave the order to charge forward. Nemo's engine trembled violently, and blazing flames flew out from the nozzle, leaving a burning red mark in the night sky. It was accompanied by a violent whirl. The thick outer armor plate was flung off the body of the ship, and mercury like metal seeped out from the gaps and quickly condensed in the wind. But the new layer of pitch-black armor had no sense of substance. Instead, it was like a crack in the void, greedily devouring all the light. Ultimate. At this moment, without worrying about Gaia's erosion and control, Ultimate opened again, replacing Nautilus's material defense as a new defense. Heaven's Fault and Ultimate combined again. At the front of Nautilus's huge body, four cracks suddenly appeared, surging with scarlet bloodlight, like eyes sweeping in all directions. After breaking away from the steel structure, the silent grudge was activated again. At this moment, Huaishur unabashedly extracted the remaining source substances and held precipitates from the battlefield. Countless blood, despair, and death surged into the core of Nemo's casting furnace like fuel, causing the warship's speed to increase again. After leaving a scarlet trail in the night sky, it descended from the sky again. In the sky, the Heavenly Fault sword, which had lost control, once again closed up the countless cracks and slashed down at Gaia. Under the heavy attacks, the illusory ring of rebirth was no longer able to withstand the weight of steel. Amidst the terrifying momentum of a falling meteor, the scorching red blade pierced through the frozen moonlight and pierced deeply into Gaia's chest, coming out from her back. It was hard to believe that the flames released by the primordial mother didn't burn its sharp blade. Instead, they attached themselves to the steel formed from the origin substance, causing the entire blade to burn like a pillar of fire. At this moment, after the collapse of the Moonlight Seal, Gaia knelt on the ground and raised its burning arm towards the sky. It wanted to grab the galloping Nautilus, but its closed palm grabbed nothing. The elegy's call failed again. The Heavenly Fault sword, which had pierced through the body, pierced deeply into the ground. It had actually nailed Gaia to the ground. Well done. Mars was overjoyed and shouted behind him, "Vulcan, hurry up. Don't rush me. I'm already prepared." In Pompeii City, which was covered in volcanic ash, a dull response came from the burning volcano. Vulcan held a hammer in his hand above the layers of lava, working hard to forge the ancient spear in his hand. He cut open his palm, allowing the thirsty metal to devour his blood, and the hammer struck down again. The earth's fire surged and burned. In his hand, the spear, which was covered in the traces of time, was visibly missing a section. Take it, Huaishur. Huaishur only heard the high-pitched sound of metal colliding in his ears. A huge amount of origin substance, an unknown divinity, emerged from his consciousness out of thin air, forcibly stuffing the hot divine mark into his hand. The essence of Vulcan's skill, the amazing skill inherited from the god of forging, and the boundless power was like red-hot steel, sizzling in his soul. It was as if Vulcan had possessed him. Without any concealment at all, it showed him all kinds of miraculous changes that he had never imagined. It taught him the essence of alchemy and forging, urged his body, and made him reach out to the Heavenly Fault sword once again in the midst of endless comprehension. After losing its support, the Heavenly Fault sword, which was rapidly disintegrating into origin substance, suddenly stopped collapsing. Then, under Vulcan's forging, it rapidly grew. All the heat accumulated in Pompeii volcano was sucked dry, and all the treasures that the god of forging had accumulated were used up. Vulcan hammered away at his work as if he had gone mad, allowing his sweat and blood to take away his strength. After a short 10 seconds, Vulcan struck the last time, and the eternal volcano fell silent. There was nothing left on the anvil. The cracked hammer fell from his hand and shattered into pieces. Vulcan, on the other hand, had turned from a burly man to a skinny, evil spirit. He collapsed on the ground, gasping for breath. When his subordinates rushed up and poured the cold spring water on his body actually sizzled like steel, releasing a terrifying high temperature. If I knew it would be so tiring, I wouldn't have come. Vulcan forced a smile and wanted to say something, but in the end, he closed his eyes in exhaustion and passed out. At this moment, on the battlefield, everything had changed. With the heavenly fault sword as the foundation, Vulcan's creation descended, spreading and growing in Mother Earth's elegy. Was it a tree or something else? In the burning fire and lightning, the heavy steel took root in the earth, deeply wedged into the soil. The towering body of the tower began to spread branches and leaves in the sky. In the middle, countless branches had seeped into Gaia's body, entangling the body of the element of destruction, completely fixing it between the sky and the earth. Hanging on the 7 branches of the giant tree, 7 different matrices lit up. They carried the world and encompassed all things. 7 completely different divine marks, the essence and power extracted from the 7 hells, reconstructed this cage that could even seal the elemental destruction within. This was the axis of all things, the world tree. Even the father of the Norse gods had once hung on it for 7 days, unable to free himself. Divine mark Uklahir. Now, in the center of the steel tree, Mother Earth wailed, her broken head slowly twisting. Her only eye glowed with a blazing light. She screamed again. A blazing light shot out from his eyes, instantly cutting through the earth and leaving a deep crack thousands of miles away. Then, it rose into the sky and tore apart the layers of wings of the angel like a hot knife through butter, leaving a tragic mark on the divine body that resembled a wheel. The solar kaleidoscope lit up again, and the sun wheel reverberated, but it couldn't resist the invisible blade condensed from grief. More than half of the bones of the world giant were torn apart, turning into burning meteorites that fell to the ground. Huishur's hair stood on end. The moment the blazing light surged, he had already made an emergency move under the impact of the premonition of death. But no matter how he changed his position in the night sky, he couldn't get rid of the blazing light that was quickly approaching him. Just in front of the Nautilus that was about to be burned to ashes, above the Pantheon Temple, Mars roared again, holding up the square shield in his hand and projecting down. The shield that had followed the god of war for a lifetime, passed down through countless generations of ascendants, and was covered with slashes from swords and knives, crumbled quickly under the light of Mother Earth's grief. But this time, there was no need for others to remind him. Mother Earth had already grasped the crucial opportunity, taking 3 steps towards the steel tree and the element of destruction in front of him. The sacred mark that was filled with endless anger and resentment had already revealed its true form. Spitting out blood, its face indigo, its huge body that wasn't inferior even to the element of destruction walked on the ground, holding the sword that was transformed from a poisonous snake and piercing down. It pierced into Gaia's face again. The burning red blade had already pierced through the head, nailing deeply into the tree trunk. The light of grief was quickly extinguished, because countless steel tentacles grew out of the animated tree, quickly covering Gaia's eyes and growing downwards. Retreat! Retreat! Above the violently shaking Nautilus, Huishur felt some kind of fluctuation nurtured in Mother Earth's shell, and his expression changed abruptly. Immediately after, he heard Mother Earth's cry of grief and indignation from within the shackles of the sharp blade and the giant tree. The ground suddenly caved in. The bottomless valley split open to both sides, and the earth's crust trembled and cracked. Not only the ground, but even the sky began to shake, and countless dark clouds were torn apart. An unprecedented force pulled the Nautilus down. Amidst the ear-piercing alarm, the emergency life support system in the inner layer of Nautilus had already taken over all the equipment, and the keel bent amidst the ear-piercing cry. They were falling downwards. Gravity! It was the sudden increase in gravity, 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times. Huishur's body dissolved in an instant, entering the form of origin matter, enveloping Nautilus and activating the ruins of End. Shadow burial teleportation. Nautilus disappeared from the sky without warning, reappearing in an attempt to escape the expanding range of the gravity anomaly. Behind them, the collapsed ground opened up like a giant mouth, rapidly expanding. It swallowed the mountains, rivers, and battlefields, chiseling a gap through the entire chessboard. In the blink of an eye, everything within 1,000 miles was crushed into dust amidst Gaia's sorrowful cries. Only the world tree that shackled Mother Earth still maintained its original shape, and cracks kept appearing. Every time it wailed and screamed, more cracks spread out from the surface. However, at the lowest end of the giant tree, there was an old figure tightly holding onto the last twisted root, and his indigo face was rapidly cracking. Just like that, he went against the gravity that was tens of thousands of times stronger and crawled upwards. When the skin that could withstand countless Rakshasa swords was peeled off under the pull of gravity, the muscles that could move mountains and destroy were torn apart amidst the sorrowful cries, and there were still gold-like bones left. He grabbed onto Gaia's body. Bit by bit, upwards and upwards, he stepped on her broad shoulders and came in front of her. He aimed the sword in his hands at her face and stabbed with all his might. The cracks in the ring of rebirth expanded, and a huge amount of Gaia's blood flowed out from it. But it was all absorbed by the world tree to mend its own cracks and maintain the existence of the shackles. An icy cold light spread over Gaia's body. "Come!" Mother Earth, who had turned into a bloody person, turned around and roared. Without thinking, Mars pulled out the sword at his waist and threw it into the distance. The glow of the throne circulated in the air and caught the sharp blade. Then, in an instant, the sharp blade that had once slaughtered countless giants and hells appeared in Mother Earth's hands. She held it upside down and stabbed it down again. Gaia's elegy paused for an instant, and the roots of the world tree grew again, wrapping around her body and locking her limbs. The solar kaleidoscope spewed out flames, and Char grabbed his spine in the solar wheel and pulled it down abruptly, throwing it at Mother Earth. The spine that had fallen off the solar wheel turned into a stone-toothed sword, and in Mother Earth's hands, it stabbed down again. The book of the world began to grow rapidly, and countless branches and leaves wrapped around the top of the ring of rebirth, completely sealing it. Countless rocks fell from Gaia's body, and after the broken cracks, a flesh-like existence appeared. But soon, under the entanglement of the world tree, it was completely covered. In the wheel of God, transformed by the throne, the archbishop reached out and pulled out the sword of glory from his waist. The sword of St. George that had once slaughtered the evil dragon species was once again sharp. Then, under the cries of the goddess of vengeance, it stabbed down. Mother Earth's struggle became more intense, and the elegy became louder. The world tree absorbed Gaia's blood and grew rapidly, and countless branches extended along Gaia's body. It was like an iron coffin that was gradually closing, swallowing her bit by bit. In the distance, the storm of destruction spread rapidly. It was like the sound of a tide born in the deep sea bursting forth. "Stop them!" Sensing the changes here, the dwarf Wang Shuangyue, who had transformed into the wind of destruction, abandoned the Russian Federation's defense line in front of her and activated the breath of primordial beginning again. The chaotic tornado storm was like a giant snake, rising from the ground and flying towards the world tree. But right in front of the storm, in the darkness, a flickering light was rapidly rising like a broken star. It blocked in front of Shuangyue. The river of Styx surged, and Osiris appeared in a flash. The sword of judgment slashed down, breaking the storm in half. The broken god of machines raised its light wings that were riddled with holes and blocked in front of the ruler. Thick smoke rose from the broken armor, and sparks were emitted from the instruments. But behind him, the thin river of Styx continued to surge, isolating the fallen country's blood river, the strange existence in the shadow realm, and the destruction swarm of the eternal world group outside. In the cabin, Orton raised his hand and wiped away the blood flowing from his nose. He looked up nonchalantly and told his opponents in front of him, "Ladies, this path is blocked." Chapter 1174. The nether river surged, separating the inside from the outside. When the Met god, who had been fighting until now, raised his face again. The chill in his eyes still chilled the hearts of the rulers. Even if he was already riddled with holes and close to the limit of destruction. But he still stood in front of hell. The shattered armor was like skin, the broken circuits were like muscle, and the exposed joints were like bones that were filled with cracks. At this very moment, the dying giant seemed to be unaffected, facing the wind of destruction and moving forward in a straight line. The storm of the sea of thunder and the sea of blood of the fallen kingdom could not bury him. The will of the ascended was attached to the dead metal, and the giant god of steel that was already on the verge of collapse began to move again. The sword of judgment surged with flames and roared, tearing apart the giant monster that crawled in the shadow realm. It was like tearing apart a thin piece of paper. Weren't you all still very passionate just now, everyone? Why are you all in such a hurry? In the rain of blood, Osiris laughed hoarsely and invited the enemies. Don't be in such a hurry. We have just begun. And so, the broken star burned and charged towards the abyss once again. Right behind him, the turbulent torrents of the Nether River cut off all paths of escape, leaving only one option for his opponents. The war is not over. With this surging death as the boundary, we will not rest until we are dead. In the Nether River, on the world tree, hanging high above, Gaia screamed, the dirge rising endlessly, so ear-piercing. It was like a final, dying struggle. At the top of the world tree, the 7 miraculous engravings trembled rapidly, flickered, and could not continue. It was impossible to tell if it was the dirge or the wail of the world tree that was ravaging the eardrums. No one knew if Gaia, who had been severely injured, could be restrained and isolated by these shackles. Asgard, Niflheim, Jotunheim, Muspelheim, using 9 different miraculous engravings, using the 9 different essences of hell to replace the 9 worlds drawn by Northern Europe. Using all the divinity in the Pantheon and Vulcan's forging, the world tree was finally forged around the atrium, represented by the Sword of Heaven. And only the part that represented the atrium was the true focus. Every other divine mark existed to suppress the domain of Midgardian. Once upon a time, in order to truly transcend fate, Odin searched the entire realm and mobilized the power of the entire Norse god system to create a miracle that could truly encompass the present realm. He intended to hang on it and sacrifice himself to obtain the essence of the 3 pillars in order to prevent the arrival of the Ragnarok. But after exhausting all his efforts, all he got was nothing. Rome spent a lot of effort to restore it during the bet. Originally, it was just a backup. If the Great Conclave could not be established, it would be used as a backup. But now, if there was anything on the chessboard that could stop Gaia, it was probably the only thing. However, would it really work? Mars stared at the giant steel tree that was trembling violently in the distance. His eyes widened. He didn't even want to blink for a second. After exhausting the reserves and power of the Pantheon, he only had the strength to support his body. Other than waiting, the only thing he could do was pray. But praying wouldn't work. The gods were already dead, and even Gaia was standing on the opposite side of the humans, becoming their opponent. There was nothing left to protect them anymore. They had to stand in front of others to protect the only world they had left. Until one day, the flood of destruction would drown them. Before that, he could only support his spear and wait for the result to come. The cracking sound echoed between heaven and earth. At every moment, countless roots were growing out. However, new cracks would appear on a layer upon layer of seals. The swords that were wedged into Gaia trembled violently, twisted by Gaia's struggle, and bounced off. Terrifying heat spewed out from the cracks, burning the face of Nangong, matriarch black. The old face no longer had the ferocity and cruelty of the goddess of vengeance, nor the solemnity and nobility of a Buddha. But under the countless scars, only a pair of eyes still surged with radiance. I offer this broken body to the master of glass. The old woman shouted hoarsely. She reached out and grasped the copper rod that Hanuman had transformed into. She poured out blood. Mighty Holy Spirit, bear witness to me. The blood turned into the tip of a spear that she held in her hand. Along with her feet, it pierced into Gaia's chest and took root on the ground. The living miracle was sucking her blood and soul, revealing its last radiance and suppressing the intense tremors from the world tree. Pa! There was a soft sound. Nangong Matriarch's face froze for a moment, and cracks appeared as she turned her head in a daze. Above Gaia's face, a thin crack suddenly appeared on the layers of steel roots, extending to both sides, growing and spreading. The cruel scales still didn't favor their existence. Even if they turned everything they had into chips and sacrificed it, they still couldn't compare to Gaia's weight. Pa! The cracks grew. The radiance of the thrones descended, and the pairs of eyes on the huge wheels quickly closed. The souls of the living saints rose, pouring all of the accumulated power in the divine coffin, turning into swords of flames that spun in all directions, nailing into the world tree, fusing the miracles into the animated cage, slowing the expansion of the crack for a moment. Following closely behind was the burning skeleton in the solar almanac. A sticky blood-like flame fell from the spinning sun and landed on the world tree. This was the last ray of sunset before destruction in the primeval era reflected by the first sun. The spreading cracks came to a standstill. However, the ray of sunset that represented the last ray of hope was gradually drying up. Trar burned himself, and the last flame jumped with difficulty. Only a candle in the wind was left. This was the final countdown. Huaishir widened his eyes and forgot to breathe. But he suddenly heard a low rumble in the wind. Like mountains rolling on the ground amidst the thunder, a figure appeared on the horizon. Quafu, the towering and huge giant, was running wildly. Burning, he swung his arms and galloped toward the world tree as if he was soaring. Wherever he went, only the sound of barbell-like laughter reverberated. Behind him, as the chains dragged, the palace that was covered in cracks surged with flames. That was the fragment of the last miracle created by the Eastern Xiao lineage, all the power left behind by the Qing Emperor. Fusong, that idiot, in the life-sustaining cabin of the sacred coffin fortress. The Qing Emperor under the oxygen mask could almost imagine Quafu's unrestrained appearance now and couldn't help but sigh. Was he too old? Could he not understand the vitality of young people? No, even if the world was destroyed in front of him, that kind of idiot shouldn't feel afraid, right? Was this a flaw or a merit? It was really hard to tell. He only hoped that he could make it in time. He had to make it in time. Now, under everyone's gaze, Quafu ran wildly again. He turned his back on the sun and headed toward the countdown of destruction. He mustered all his last strength. His shouts and roars abruptly tugged at the chains on his shoulders that were about to be embedded into his bones, causing the damaged palace to suddenly rise into the air. As he waved his arms, it spun and flew towards the world tree between the heavens and the earth. Go! Just like that, dragging Quafu, who had lost his strength, the remains of Fusong soared freely in the wind. Defying thousands of times the gravity, it once again followed the call of Mother Earth and flew toward the world tree. However, before it could enter Gaia's embrace, it had already fallen into the sun wheel of the solar almanac stone. For the dim flame, it was filled with light. The last bit of the candle flame suddenly jumped, colliding and spreading crazily. That brilliant light shrouded the world tree, continuously sprinkling down the light of the setting sun. It merged into the system of the 9 great worlds, sealing and strengthening it. The complicated secret ritual that symbolized the divisions of the 9 great worlds reappeared on the world tree. The song of the bell stopped abruptly. However, a loud sound that was even louder than that rang out from the seal of the world tree. It suddenly burst forth, causing the heaven and earth to shake. It was like a heartbeat. A huge amount of blood spewed out from behind the cracks, fertilizing the barren world and forming a scarlet ocean. And under those rapidly closing cracks, there was actually a flesh arm that looked like a human that suddenly pierced out. Then there was a second one. It was like a dying beast that had drilled out of its cicada slough, shedding its dead skin. This was no longer a degree that could be described as a gecko cutting off its tail. Instead, it was like the organs were first separated from the body before the main body was completely withered. It made everyone feel a chill that went deep into their bones. Even if it had to give up most of its body and strength, Gaia did not hesitate to forcefully escape from the rapidly closing shackles. But right in front of the crack, what awaited it was only a cold light that was like a sword blade. You want to escape so easily? It's not that simple. On the pitch-black hull, a solemn iron light reappeared. A high-pitched cry that was like a whistle burst out along with the spurting of flames. Notify the entire ship. On the bridge of the Nautilus, the navigator of the Kingdom of Heaven raised his hand and pointed forward. Raise the flag, adjust the course, and activate all engine units. Target destroy the old Gaia. The heavenly Imperial Palace rang, and the ultimate trembled. It extracted the endless death and source substance on the battlefield, exhausting its last bit of strength. Amidst the fanatical shouts and cheers of countless heroic souls, the burning emblem from the Republic rose from the hull once again, leading the last brilliance of the stars in the sky. Without the ammunition in the warehouse, without the armor in the heavenly Imperial Palace, and without the armor that could sweep through hell, it didn't matter. There was still one more weapon that could be used. They were still here. The war wasn't over yet, and the enemy was still right in front of them. Then, there was only one choice in front of them. Accelerate. Accelerate again. A ferocious outline appeared from the ultimate and enveloped the hull. Amidst the surging tide, the hatred of the past turned into a sharp blade, using the entire battleship as a javelin that was thrown at the elements of destruction. It broke through the restraints of the atmosphere and gravity, ignoring Gaia's sorrowful cries and anger, and moved forward. Crash! You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.